Chapter 671. Do I need 9 days and 9 nights to hatch a broken egg like you? You think too highly of yourself. Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully, and with a flick of his finger, a green flame appeared. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, 1 day is enough. He was trying to save face now, so he made it sound easy. But when he was messing around, it was not as easy as he said. Wah! The green flame of the 3 true fire. The crow cried out in surprise, flapping its wings and flying around the green flame on Yu Qianqiu's fingertip. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, you recognize the 3 true fire as well? Although it looked like a crow, it was still a phoenix's descendant, and had good taste. The crow nodded excitedly as it flew, saying, of course I recognize it. We phoenixes are naturally good at controlling fire. How could we not recognize the 3 true fire? As if to prove that it could control fire, as it flew, its black feathers suddenly glowed red, and in an instant, its entire body was covered in red flames. It flew around the room nimbly, the red flames supporting it like soft wings. At first glance, it really looked like a fire phoenix. Such a beautiful scene naturally attracted Wu Lishua's attention, and her eyes lit up. Yu Qianqiu saw that Wu Lishua liked it, and wanted to please her. The green flame disappeared from his fingertip, and with a flick of his palm, a red flame appeared, instantly forming a lifelike fire phoenix. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand lightly, and the fire phoenix flapped its wings, catching up to the crow and flying alongside it. Wah! The crow cried out in surprise again, retracting the flames on its body and landing on Wu Lishua's shoulder. It stared at Yu Qianqiu in surprise and said, so you are also proficient in the art of controlling fire. It's just a little trick. Yu Qianqiu said modestly. He glanced at Wu Lishua, who was following the fire phoenix. He spread out his palm, and a green flame appeared. It instantly turned into a vivid and lifelike fire phoenix. It chased after the red phoenix. So beautiful. Wu Lishua couldn't help but praise. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, there's more. A black flame appeared in his palm, instantly forming a lifelike black fire phoenix. It flapped its wings and flew into the air, joining the flying team. 3 different colored fire phoenixes happily chased each other in the room. Wow! The crow cried out again, the black flame of the 3 true fire, there's even a purple one. What about the purple flame of the 3 true flames? I want to see. What are you looking at? There's nothing left. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and 3 fire phoenixes flew over, collided with his body, and disappeared. I want to see it. Let me see your purple fire phoenix. I beg you. Crow's pleading was futile, and she hugged Wu Lishua's neck, begging, help me beg your man. I want to see the purple flame phoenix. Wu Lishua obviously wanted to see it as well, and her eyes revealed a pleading look as she looked at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu shrugged his shoulders helplessly and said, I've never seen a purple flame myself, where would I get one to show you? He then turned to Crow and chuckled, little phoenix, do you know where to find purple flames? This was the question he really wanted to ask. There should be purple flames in every realm, right? It's the source of power that supports every realm, and its power is very great. On the other hand, the green fire and black fire on your body shouldn't be flames of this world. Strange, how did you get your hands on them? The crow recalled and said. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand impatiently and said, don't tell me these useless things, just tell me where I can find them. How would I know? I'm not familiar with this place. Crow said with some grievance. Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes at him, turning to look at Wu Lishua solemnly, as if he wanted to say something. Wu Lishua was a little nervous under his gaze, and asked, what is it? Lishua, I hope you can keep it secret. Yu Qianqiu pointed at Crow and said, if anyone asks you anything about it, just say you don't know. You can push it to me, and say I gave it to you. Wu Lishua was taken aback, and asked, I can't tell anyone. Do you want to hide it from my grandfather, parents, and brother? Yu Qianqiu nodded, then shook his head and said, it's not that I want to hide it from them, it's just that now isn't the time to tell them. For your safety, don't tell them for now, it's actually for their own good. I understand, I promise I won't tell anyone. Wu Lixue promised solemnly. Yu Qianqiu smiled happily, then stared at Crow, his face darkening, and said, "And you, if you don't want to get into trouble, it's best not to speak carelessly. I understand, it's hard to predict a person's heart." Crow said happily, "Besides, do you think a noble phoenix like me is someone that anyone can make me open my mouth to speak?" Spirit Fong Valley was surrounded by 3 countries, and the weather was pleasant. It was verdant and lush throughout the 4 seasons, and there were many unknown flowers blooming in the mountains. Once the Allure Beauty and Yan Yu arrived, they fell in love with the environment. The 2 of them strolled along the mountain path to Spirit Fong Valley, and the ordinary people who came and went looking for medicine all looked at them with amazement. The Allure Beauty and Yan Yu had already changed into ordinary clothes, otherwise with their attire, especially the Allure Beauty's faintly discernible style, it would really be shocking. Even so, it still could not cover up the beauty of the ordinary people. As the 2 of them walked, from time to time they could see the ordinary people who took the initiative to dig stones from the mountains to mend the road, and on the stone tablets on both sides of the road were engraved some words of gratitude to Spirit Fong Valley. For example, there were countless inscriptions such as magical hands to bring the dead back to life, and divine doctor of the world. These were all done by the ordinary people in order to thank Spirit Fong Valley, and no one forced them. However, what the 2 women did not know was that if Lu Yanqing had not always done good to the ordinary people, Spirit Fong Valley would have long been razed to the ground under Bai Changchun's anger. Whether she could keep her own life was still a problem, and Bai Changchun did not care whether she was the world's most beautiful woman or not. To the 2 women, to be able to receive the sincere respect of so many people in their lives, what else could they ask for? As women, the 2 of them had struggled in the cultivation world for so many years, and now they felt that this was the life they should pursue. The scene in front of them made the 2 women extremely envious of Lu Yanqing. Especially Yan Yu, she had long been tired of the life in the cornucopia brothel. The peace and tranquility here made her feel like she was reborn. However, they also knew that Lu Yanqing could not be disturbed by others here, and it was also related to her background and high cultivation. If it were the 2 of them, they were afraid that it would be difficult to achieve their wishes. After the 2 women returned to the valley that was filled with the fragrance of medicine all year round, they saw the Spirit Fong Valley disciples were treating the ordinary people in the continuous abode that practiced medicine to help the people. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded, then rolled up their sleeves and went in to help. The Spirit Fong Valley disciples knew that the 2 of them were the guests of the Valley Master, so they did not dare to trouble them and repeatedly declined. The 2 of them did not stand on ceremony. They first picked what they could help, chopped wood to boil water, and poured tea to quench the thirst of the ordinary people who came from afar. As a result, they received a sincere gratitude from the people who came to seek medical treatment. This kind of treatment was something the 2 of them had never received before. Apart from working more and more energetically, they could not help but secretly thank Yu Qianqiu for the arrangements he made for them. On the platform at the top of the medicine hut, when Lanfeng silently watched the 2 women who walked into the abode at the foot of the mountain. After releasing his divine sense to scan the area, a faint smile appeared on his face. It seemed that the 2 women arranged by Yu Qianqiu would not cause any trouble for the Spirit Fong Valley. In the shade on the right side of the platform, there was a long platform built with stone slabs. Lu Yanqing, dressed in a green robe, was personally arranging the 10 pots of blood orchids that Yu Qianqiu had given her. Behind her, the 9th brother Xian, who was in the early stage of soul formation, was staring at 3rd brother Xian with a gloomy face. After a long silence, he somewhat gritted his teeth and said, "3rd brother, I asked you to serve master. How can you leave master and go play alone?" 3rd brother Xian laughed and said, "9th brother, don't be anxious. If it wasn't for master's permission, how would I dare to go play? Don't stare at me. If you don't believe me, you can ask master." "Alright, stop arguing." Lu Yanqing, who was fiddling with the blood orchids, said softly with her back facing the 2 of them, "Both of you leave. Do what you need to do." The 2 of them did not dare to say more. After bowing, they both retreated. But before third brother Exian left, he looked at the 10 pots of blood orchids with a somewhat strange expression. And ninth brother Exian looked at Wen Lanfeng's back with some disgust. After serving the blood orchids, Lu Yanqing tilted her head to look at Wen Lanfeng standing on the edge of the cliff, and gently walked over. After standing side by side on the edge of the cliff, Lu Yanqing slowly took off the gauze hat on her head. Facing the rising sun, her beautiful face was suffused with a faint luster. She turned her head and asked softly, "When are you leaving?" As soon as Wen Lanfeng turned his head, the look in his eyes immediately froze. Strands of silky black hair were tied behind her lustrous ears. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, her white teeth were like shells, her red lips reflected the sun, and her eyes were clear and intelligent. The skin on her face was not made up, but the color was like the morning glow reflecting the snow, crystal white with a hint of rosy. Standing on the edge of the cliff, like an orchid in an empty valley, a pair of intelligent eyes staring at him, making him unable to help but palpitate, Lu Yanqing saw that he was staring at her foolishly, and could not help but frown slightly. She said unhappily, "Wen Lanfeng, please respect me." Wen Lanfeng suddenly came back to his senses. He awkwardly turned his head to the side and stared steadily into the distance. Although it was not the first time he saw Lu Yanqing's true appearance, he would always be stunned by her stunning appearance. Every time he saw her, he would never get tired of looking at her. "Do you hate me that much? Do you still think I am not sincere to you?" Wen Lanfeng said with a wry smile. "Is it not good to be friends between you and me?" Lu Yanqing asked. "Oh. Be friends? I can't face you calmly as a friend." Wen Lanfeng shook his head, took a deep breath, turned his head again, and solemnly asked, "Can you be honest with me, what kind of man do you like?" Chapter 672. Is it meaningful to ask such a question? Lu Yanqing shook her head slightly. Of course it is meaningful. Wen Lanfeng's gaze was firm. At least it is meaningful to me. You should also understand that it is meaningful to me. I don't want to give up, and I won't give up. I still want to work hard because you are the biggest reason why I stay in this world. Otherwise, do you know? If I concentrate on my cultivation, I'm afraid the day I ascend to the immortal realm is not far away. Lu Yanqing looked at him in surprise. Are you confident that you can integrate the 7 spirits into your life spirit? Wen Lanfeng smiled bitterly. If I can get rid of my selfish thoughts, it should be within 100 years, or even less. Then I should congratulate you. The cultivation world has not had a cultivator ascend to the immortal realm for many years. You are the first person to carry on the past. Lu Yanqing smiled. The first person to carry on the past? Wen Lanfeng mocked himself. You think too highly of me. Have you forgotten what the emissary of hell said? The real first person is Bai Changchun. His cultivation has long surpassed the soul formation final stage. I'm afraid that even if I ascend to the immortal realm, I will not be able to withstand a single blow from him. Lu Yanqing frowned and shook her head. Why do you have to compare yourself to him? He is different from us. He is too ambitious. What do you mean? Wen Lanfeng was alarmed. Are you suspecting that he has some ambition? That's why he has stayed in the human world and refused to ascend? No, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that he has any ambition. If he does, he doesn't need to hide it. No one in the cultivation world can stop him. He is too strong. Lu Yanqing hugged the gauze hat in her hand and sighed against the morning sun. I said he is ambitious because I feel that he is different from us. Among us, some of us fight for power and profit to be the overlord. Some of us fight for a false name on the cultivation world's ranking list. He does not care about these things at all. I once heard Nongzhu say that Bai Changchun has been pursuing some illusory great path. Great path? Wen Lanfeng was surprised. What is great path? What is great path? Why haven't I heard of it before? Lu Yanqing shook her head and said, I've never heard of it. I've asked Nongzhu, but Nongzhu doesn't know what it is. I just occasionally hear similar words from Bai Changchun's mouth, saying that it is likely to be a cultivation realm and Bai Changchun's ideal. Wen Lanfeng pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about him. His cultivation method is incredible. I've never heard of him using things like spirit stones. He's walking a different path from us. Maybe the path he's walking is the so-called Great Way. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Even if you told us, it would be difficult for us to understand. For Bai Changchun, what he pursued was the Great Tao, but for me, what I pursued was you. I just want to know what kind of man you like. I hope you can point out a path for me to reach the other side. Don't force me, okay?" A tired look appeared on Lu Yanqing's face. "I've never forced you." Wen Lanfeng's face also had a trace of a bleak smile as he said, "But too many things have happened in the cultivation world recently. I'm inexplicably a little worried. If I don't ask you this time, I'm afraid I won't have the chance to in the future. So please forgive me for being straightforward this time." Lu Yanqing turned back to look at him in surprise, as if she did not understand why he would suddenly say such obscure words. She slowly turned back to face the mountains under the sun, paused, and said, "I used to secretly like many men." This sentence suddenly made Wen Lanfeng a little dumbfounded. He looked at Lu Yanqing dumbfoundedly, as if he didn't know her. Lu Yanqing continued to say faintly, "I've forgotten when it was. It's been too long. It seems that at that time, I hadn't been accepted by Master, or maybe I was still at the age of my first love. There are always some men who make my heart beat faster when I first see them. That feeling of shyness and admiration is really good. I was accepted by Master in a daze. After stepping into the cultivation world for a few years, I realized. Maybe it's because our spirit Fang Valley has always been practicing medicine and helping the world. I've seen too many secular people live and die. Unconsciously, I can no longer have any feelings for the short-lived secular people. I only have sympathy and help. When I cast my gaze towards the cultivation world, who would have thought that all I saw was mutual deception, unscrupulous competition, and incessant fighting and killing? I was born with an aversion to these things. This is the reason why I never made any choice." After listening to these words, Wen Lanfeng's dumbfounded expression finally eased. He nodded silently to show that he understood. Which woman didn't have the age of a young girl thinking of love? After a pause, he said, "Is there no man in the cultivation world that you like?" "There was one, but it can't be described as a man that I like. It's just that his great compassion made me admire him. There's no love between a man and a woman. If I have to choose one, I'd rather choose him," Lu Yanqing said frankly. Wen Lanfeng's pupils suddenly shrank. He racked his brains, but with his experience, he couldn't think of anyone in the cultivation world who deserved the title of Great Compassion. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he asked, "Can you tell me who that person is? Do I know him?" "You know him." Lu Yanqing nodded. Wen Lanfeng could not suppress his excitement and asked, "Who is it? You once challenged him to a duel because of my slip of the tongue. As a result, you were seriously injured by him and had to retreat for 100 years. Perhaps you and everyone else thinks I was just being perfunctory, but the fact is that I was able to say those words, and I had the same idea in my mind. I couldn't help saying them, and I ended up causing you trouble." Lu Yanqing's expression was very calm when she said this. It seemed that she had decided not to do anything to hide from Wen Lanfeng. However, when Wen Lanfeng heard this, he was stunned as if he was struck by lightning. After a long time, he murmured, "Bai. The person you're talking about is Bai Changchun." Then he came to his senses and shook his head again and again. "No, this is your excuse. I have no opinion on what evaluation you used to describe Bai Changchun, but you said that Bai Changchun is merciful. Not to mention me, everyone in the world knows that he is iron-blooded and ruthless. Countless people have died in his hands. How can he be worthy of the title of Great Compassion? What everyone sees may not be true. Maybe what I see is also an illusion." Lu Yanqing was silent and said, "I just regret that I don't have Bai Changchun's ability. I practice medicine in Lingfang Valley and the number of people I can save is limited. On the surface, Bai Changchun seems to be ruthless, but in fact, he has shocked the entire cultivation world. No one dares to act recklessly. Otherwise, the cultivation world will be in chaos. I'm afraid that the damage to the mortals in the secular world will be incalculable. I don't know how many people will die. Wen Lanfeng said in a deep voice, "This may be your wishful thinking." Lu Yanqing smiled noncommittally and continued to say, "In fact, with Bai Changchun's cultivation, there is no need to intervene in the affairs of the cultivation world. No one dares to look down on him. And he does not want to get anything from the cultivation world. Besides, he disdains to intervene in the affairs of the cultivation world. Then why does he make a move every time the cultivation world is in a state of panic? Haven't you noticed? As long as he makes a move, the chaos in the cultivation world will immediately calm down and restore the state of mutual checks and balances. The timing of his move is very subtle. Obviously, he is not killing for the sake of killing." Wen Lanfeng fell into deep thought when he heard this. After a long time, he slowly said, "As an outsider, you can see it more clearly than us. Your words remind me of the purpose that Bai Changchun set for the World Chamber of Commerce last time. Maybe you are right. Maybe the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker." Lu Yanqing faintly sighed and said, "So I think Bai Changchun is merciful and compassionate. He saved the lives of the majority of the people in the world, but he is willing to bear the infamy behind his back. In fact, he does not care about the infamy behind his back. He is not the kind of person who acts for fame and profit. Compared to the people he saved, my Spirit Fong Valley can only be regarded as doing a good deed at most, but we have received the praise of the people in the world. But then again, although I admire his breadth of mind, I do not approve of his iron-blooded methods in the process of doing things. With his cultivation, there is no need to kill to stop killing. He could have done it more tactfully. There is no need to kill so many people." Wen Lanfeng's heart was suddenly enlightened. He understood that Lu Yanqing only admired Bai Changchun and did not really like him. But there were some things that he did not want to argue with Lu Yanqing. Although the onlooker knew some things better than the people in the game, there were also some things that he did not know. Now that he thought about it, if Bai Changchun did not use iron-blooded methods, who in the cultivation world would be afraid of him? Relying on words to reason, who would listen to him when faced with benefits? He was afraid that Bai Changchun would not be able to deter them even if he wanted to. In the end, more people might die. So, Bai Changchun is not the man you like. Wen Lanfeng had regained his calmness. He pondered and said, "But what I want to know is, what kind of man do you like? I want to look in the mirror and see how far I am. Before answering your question, I want to ask you a question." Lu Yanqing turned around and stared at him solemnly without blinking and asked, "You said before that you could not face me with the mentality of a friend. Is it because of my appearance?" Wen Lanfeng was speechless. The reason why he could not face Lu Yanqing with the mentality of a friend was not because of his appearance, but because he really liked Lu Yanqing. After so many years of effort, he could not convince himself to let it go. But he did not deny that Lu Yanqing's peerless appearance was one of the reasons, because every time he saw her, his heart would palpitate. How could he be a friend? If you don't speak, then you admit it. Lu Yanqing sighed faintly and turned to look into the distance again. With a trace of melancholy in her eyes, she slowly said, "Sometimes I hate my appearance, but it also makes me understand what I need. In fact, I am not aloof or narcissistic. No matter how beautiful I am essentially an ordinary woman. I don't have high requirements for the man I like. It can even be said that I have no requirements." "No requirements?" Wen Lanfeng could not believe it and said, "Then what are you waiting for?" Lu Yanqing smiled faintly and said, "If I have to say that I have requirements, I just hope that he can treat me as an ordinary woman. He can face me calmly and let me know that I am not the so-called first beauty in the world, but an ordinary woman. I don't care how rich he is, or how handsome he is, or how high his cultivation is, or how noble his status is. I don't even care if he's a good person or a bad person. I just want to be like an ordinary woman and find a man who can make my heart palpitate, a man who can make me give everything. Is this request really too much? Chapter 673. This request is not too much. When Lanfeng said this, it was hard to tell whether he was crying or laughing. But in his heart, he was asking, but who knows how high the hurdle in your heart is? Who can make your heart palpitate? There is no standard for your request at all, it's pointless for me to ask. I want to ask, is there anyone who can make your heart palpitate right now? Lanfeng's expression was a little lonely because he knew he was not the person who could make her heart palpitate. She had already indirectly told him. Lu Yanqing pondered for a while, then shook her head and said, if there is, you will know. That is to say, I still have a chance. Lanfeng looked up at the sky and laughed, somewhat self-deprecatingly. Why do you have to do this? Lu Yanqing sighed and said, since your cultivation is only a step away from ascending to the immortal realm, why not concentrate on cultivation and ascend to the immortal realm as soon as possible? Immortal body? Even the underworld envoys died in the hands of Bai Changchun, presumably the immortal realm is not much better. Besides. Lanfeng turned to stare at Lu Yanqing and said word by word, to be able to protect you forever is my greatest wish. What if I can't see you again after ascending to the immortal realm? Instead of worrying about being separated by two worlds, it is better to stay in the human world. At least when I want to see you, I can still see you. If you encounter any trouble, even if I can't help, I can still do what I can. You. It was the first time Lu Yanqing heard such a naked and undisguised confession from Lanfeng. Even her heart of stone could not help but be moved. In the end, she restrained her emotions and sighed faintly again and said, why do you have to do this? Haha. Lanfeng let out a hearty laugh, as if he had relaxed a lot after saying what was in his heart. He pointed to the abode at the foot of the mountain and changed the topic. It seems that the two women arranged by Yu Qianqiu are good in nature. They can lower themselves to do odd jobs, not bad, not bad. Lu Yanqing stared at him silently for a while. When she heard him mention Yu Qianqiu, she frowned and asked, I have something I want to verify with you. I hope you can tell me the truth. Lanfeng turned around in surprise and asked, what's the matter? Is Yu Qianqiu a disciple of Bai Changchun? Lu Yanqing asked. Lanfeng was stunned and asked in surprise, not many people know about this. How did you know? Did Nongzhu tell you? So my guess is correct. Lu Yan gave a rare cold snort and said, no one told me, but I accidentally found out that Niu Yud is Yu Qianqiu in disguise, plus a few things linked together. I guessed that Yu Qianqiu and Bai Changchun have a relationship, but I don't dare to confirm that he is Bai Changchun's disciple. I know you also know the secret, otherwise you wouldn't support him time and time again. I can't imagine that Bai Changchun, who has been arrogant all his life, has taught a deceitful disciple, who uses fake pills to harm people and cheat money. Niu Yud is Yu Qianqiu in disguise? Lanfeng was shocked. Lu Yanqing asked with some astonishment, don't you know? I really don't know about this. Lanfeng did not doubt Lu Yanqing's words at all. He frowned and pondered, it seems that Nongzhu also knows about this. No wonder Yu Qianqiu and Niu Yud are familiar. It turns out that they are the same person. What does Yu Qianqiu want to do? He is too reckless. His gaze swept past the abode below, and he immediately narrowed his eyes. He pointed at it and said, if that's the case, then Yan Yu of the Sleeping Spring Loft is his. Reckless, this kid is simply messing around, too outrageous. How could Bai Changchun accept such a person as a disciple? Is there any reason why Yu Qianqiu did this? Lu Yanqing asked. I don't know. Lanfeng said in a low voice, I have to go back and send a message to Nongzhu to see if Bai Changchun knows about this. If this boy is fooling around behind Bai Changchun's back, it is simply ruining Bai Changchun's wisdom. Bai Changchun must discipline him well. Otherwise, with this boy's cultivation at such a young age, once Bai Changchun leaves, there will be a big scum in the cultivation world. Then he looked at Lu Yanqing and said, Niu Yud and Yu Qianqiu have not stopped. This matter cannot be delayed. If it is too late, who knows what this boy will do to harm people. I will go back first. Lu Yanqing nodded and watched Wen Lanfeng quickly fly into the sky. On a hill behind the medicine hut, Xian Lao San, who was hiding in a tree, saw Wen Lanfeng leave and immediately rushed to the foot of the mountain. He landed at the foot of the mountain and looked around for a while. After confirming that there was no one, he quickly pushed aside a pile of weeds beside him and saw 3 unconscious young girls lying inside. Looking at their simple and shabby clothes, they were obviously farm girls. Without hesitation, Xian Laosan carried them on his shoulder and quickly sneaked into the depths of the mountain with the 3 girls. He was exceptionally careful along the way. He arrived at the foot of an inconspicuous hill in the depths of the mountain and stopped beside a huge rock that was embedded in the mountain. He looked around vigilantly once again and suddenly scuttled into the underbrush under the huge rock. He carried the 3 women and disappeared into the underbrush together. If one was not familiar with the terrain here, who would have thought that there was a cave behind the grass? The passage leading to the cave was not smooth. In the darkness, there were abrupt stones sticking out. However, Xian Laosan was obviously very familiar with this place. He easily brought the 3 girls to the innermost part. The space inside the cave was not big, at most 4 or 5 rooms. However, it was filled with fluorescent stones to drive away the darkness. It was very bright, at least reaching the level of ordinary lighting. Only a few large boulders that were erected were dim, giving people a kind of unfathomable feeling. Xian Laosan directly threw the people he brought into the ground. He looked around but did not see Yan Juexing's figure. His eyes looked towards the shadows behind the boulders. Sure enough, after a while, Yan Juexing flashed out from behind a boulder at the edge like a ghost. Yan Juexing also appeared very careful. His eyes glowed with a demonic red light. After glancing at the passage where they came in, he asked, "Did you encounter anything unusual on the way here?" Xian Laosan respectfully replied, "Rest assured, master. Generally, people in the cultivation world will not trespass into the territory of Lingfang Valley. It is also very difficult for people in the secular world to break into this place. I was very careful on the way here and did not find anything unusual." "What about that one Lanfeng? Is he still in Lingfang Valley?" "No, I came here after seeing him leave with my own eyes." Yan Juexing nodded his head and felt slightly relieved. He had no choice but to be so cautious. Now that he had become the target of everyone in the cultivation world, it would be difficult for him to get rid of them with his current cultivation. If he was targeted by a spirit-severing expert, there was basically no hope of escape. For the sake of safety, he decided not to contact Bing Qingzi or anyone else for the time being, because he could not afford to fail again. And Lingfang Valley, this ungoverned area, became the best place for him to take refuge. Who would have thought that he would hide in Lu Yanqing's Lingfang Valley? Yan Juexing glanced at the 3 young girls on the ground and frowned. "Why are there only 3? I don't know if I can succeed with just these. I still need 49 more in the future. If you go on like this, how long will I have to wait?" As he waved his hand, the sound of staggering footsteps came from behind a few large rocks. 5 silly girls walked out from the shadows as if they were sleepwalking. Xian Laosan said in fear, "Master, please calm down. There are really not many families in the periphery of Lingfang Valley. Moreover, Master only needs virgins with a body of pure yin, so it is more time-consuming to find them. If it is an ordinary woman, it should be easier to find." "Can you?" "No." Yan Juexing refused flatly. "You can only find virgins. Women who have lost their chastity cannot be wanted. Blood demon flower needs pure yin blood to be nourished. Blood that has lost yin qi will greatly reduce the magical effect of blood demon flower." Xian Laosan quickly agreed, "Yes, yes, yes. I will increase the search efforts in the vicinity of Lingfang Valley and try to gather enough people for Master as soon as possible." Yan Juexing just showed a satisfied expression, but his eyes flickered as if he thought of something. He waved his hand and said, "From today onwards, you can't do anything near Lingfang Valley. Otherwise, it will cause suspicion sooner or later." Try to go as far as possible and search in the territory of the 3 countries. Remember, it is best to find the daughters of poor families. Such families will not make much noise if there are only a few people. Don't touch those who are rich or powerful. Such families will have a greater impact if they lose face than ordinary people. If you make a big noise, it will cause suspicion sooner or later. Also, don't do it in one place. It will also easily cause suspicion. I will remember. But in that case, I am afraid that in terms of time. Xian Laosan seemed to be in a dilemma. Yan Juexing knew what he wanted to say and sighed helplessly, alas. If it is slow, then so be it. At this point, I don't mind waiting for a few more days. The most important thing is safety first. We can't let anyone find out. I understand. Xian Laosan said respectfully. Yan Juexing looked at the 3 unconscious girls on the ground and then looked at the 5 people behind him. He muttered to himself, there are 8 people now. I can try to use the great method to mature the blood demon flower and see if it will succeed. He nodded and waved to Xian Laosan, go and guard the cave entrance. Don't let anyone or beast come in and disturb us. Unexpectedly, Xian Laosan said hesitantly, Master, there is something about the 7-star blood orchid. I don't know if I should say it or not. Oh. Yan Juexing suddenly turned around and asked curiously, you know about the 7-star blood orchid? Why don't you tell me about it? Yes. Xian Laosan bowed slightly and said, before coming, I saw Master playing with the 7-star blood orchid with my own eyes. There were more than 10 pots. 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid? Yan Juexing's eyes lit up. He asked urgently in a louder voice, are you sure you saw it correctly? Chapter 674. It should be right. It is very similar to the blood orchid in Master's hands, but it is more lush, and each pot has 7 small white flowers and exudes a faint smell of blood. My master also said that it is the 7-star blood orchid brought back from the cornucopia. Xian Laosan said. Then it should be right. Hey! Is what Yu Qianqiu said true? Yan Juexing muttered. He remembered that Yu Qianqiu said in the cornucopia that he sold the 10 pots of blood orchid to someone else. At that time, he thought that Yu Qianqiu was lying. He didn't expect it to be true, and he didn't expect it to be sold to Lu Yanqing. If Master needs, this subordinate will find a way to steal the 10 pots of blood orchid. Xian Laosan flattered. Yan Juexing hesitated and shook his head. He raised his hand and said, don't act rashly. A little impatience will spoil a great plan. Although I really want the 10 pots of mature blood orchid, it is not the time. Once the 10 pots of blood orchid of your master are stolen, and Yu Qianqiu revealed the truth to me, it is inevitable that someone will suspect me. For safety reasons, you must not touch the 10 pots of blood orchid of your master, at least not for the time being. This subordinate understands. Xian Laosan bowed slightly. Yan Juexing waved his hand and said, set up a soundproof enchantment at the entrance of the cave and guard it well. The former obeyed and quickly rushed to the entrance of the cave to set up, and then hid in the cave behind the grass to guard against people breaking in. Inside the cave, Yan Juexing flicked his fingers and shot 3 black lights directly at the 3 young women on the ground. The 3 women woke up from their coma one after another. The person who woke up first realized that he was lying on the ground. He hurriedly got up and looked at his surroundings. Ah! He was so scared that he let out an ear-piercing scream. His voice echoed in the cave. She didn't know what happened and how she suddenly appeared in a cave. In some dim light, a good-looking but expressionless man was staring at her indifferently. Behind the man were 5 girls with dull expressions, and the atmosphere was extremely frightening. The most terrifying thing was that beside her, there were 2 figures struggling to get up. The strange scene was beyond her imagination, and she subconsciously let out a terrified scream. Yan Juexing's eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light, penetrating the other party's mind and cutting off the scream halfway. As soon as the other 2 girls raised their heads, their eyes met with a pair of glowing red eyes. The fear on their faces immediately turned into a sluggish expression. The bewitching red light disappeared. Yan Juexing's cold eyes quickly swept across the eyes of the 8 young girls. Silly smiles appeared on the faces of the 8 young girls. They raised their hands and slowly undressed themselves. Yan Juexing was not interested in the girls undressing in front of him at all. He took out the 7 pots of immature 7-star blood orchids from his storage bag and carefully took out the blood orchids by their roots from the soil in the flower pots. He gently patted off a large piece of soil on the roots. A naked young girl walked in front of him and stretched out her hands, revealing a pleading expression. Yan Juexing stretched out a finger, and his fingertips glowed with black light. He directly cut the girl's wrists, and blood immediately gurgled out. The girl didn't seem to feel a trace of pain. Instead, she showed a satisfied expression. She took the blood orchids from Yan Juexing and carefully held the roots. She crossed her fingers to form a bowl shape and hugged the blood orchids on the flat lower abdomen under her navel. The blood flowing out of her wrists immediately flowed into her clasped palms, nourishing the roots of the blood orchids. 7 blood orchids were held on the abdomen by the 7 girls in a row. There was still a girl who walked over foolishly and stretched out her hands. Yan Juexing glanced at the 7 of them and said indifferently to the girl, "You step aside first. If there is any accident, I will use you as a substitute." The girl immediately stepped back obediently. Yan Juexing walked to the center of the cave and clapped his hands. The 7 girls holding the blood orchids immediately walked over and stood in a circle, surrounding him in the middle. Yan Juexing looked around at the naked bodies of the 7 young girls. No matter how tempting they were, he couldn't see any lust in his cold eyes. He silently looked at the wounds on the wrists of the 7 girls. Blood almost soaked the roots of the blood orchids in his clasped palms. Yan Juexing slowly closed his eyes and made a messy and complicated gesture with his hands. Black mist slowly emerged from his body and lingered around him. The extremely strange scene didn't last long. Suddenly, he let out a muffled hum. 7 shining red bloodlines drilled out of his nostrils and circled around his body like spiritual snakes. The lingering black mist quickly rushed to the 7 shining red bloodlines. In a blink of an eye, they turned into 7 dancing black snakes and circled around the top of the cave. There was a red light shining on the snake's head. It was the glowing bloodlines entrenched in it. "Open your mouth." Yan Juexing let out a soft shout and opened his cold eyes. The 7 girls quickly opened their mouths. The 7 black snakes that were flying in the air seemed to have found their home in an instant. They swung their tails and swooped down from the top of the cave, drilling into the mouths of the 7 girls. As soon as the 7 girls closed their mouths, they couldn't help but let out a painful muffled groan. The expressions on their faces changed rapidly. The blue veins on their necks and foreheads bulged. Their eyeballs protruded as if they were going to jump out of their sockets. Their naked bodies trembled uncontrollably. Obviously, they were suffering from unbearable pain. Yan Juexing simply ignored the unbearable pain of the 7 girls. His figure flashed quickly. He stretched out 2 fingers of his right hand like a dragonfly skimming the water. He dipped the blood on one of the girl's hands and quickly drew a pentagonal star pattern on the girl's forehead. After he was done, he turned around and waved the 2 fingers of his right hand. Soon, he used the blood of the 7 girls to draw a pentagonal star pattern on each of their foreheads. After doing this, Yan Juexing quietly closed his eyes and pondered for a while. Then, he slowly knelt down on one knee piously. He pressed the finger that was stained with the blood of the 7 girls on his forehead. He pressed it heavily and drew a bright vertical mark from the center of his forehead to between his eyebrows. It was as if he had grown a 3rd eye. Yan Juexing knelt on one knee in the middle of the 7 naked girls. He put his palms together and pressed them on his chest. He lowered his head and chanted piously. The 7 girls seemed to have a telepathic connection with him. They chanted in unison, "Ancient existence. A supreme demon god. Please listen to the humble pleas of your incomparably loyal people. Almighty demon god, please open your incomparably broad chest and bestow power to your people who worship you piously. Let the blooming blood demon flower praise your greatness and wisdom. The voices of the 8 people reverberated in the cave, creating layers of sound waves. After he finished reciting those words, a black light suddenly appeared above Yan Juexing's head, revolving between the 7 girls. The cave immediately became deathly still. The sounds that were originally reverberating in the cave were suppressed by a desolate and ancient aura the moment the black light appeared. The desolate and ancient aura spread out from the rotating black light. The rotating black light gradually rotated from the size of a bean to the size of a round table. Then, it stopped expanding. The black light became denser and denser. Suddenly, it flashed and split into 2. The 2 black lights seemed to be brewing and floated. After a while, they actually formed 2 huge eyes. This pair of transformed eyes were like the eyes of a real person. Every frown and movement was bright and full of unquestionable majesty. Although it looked like a real person's eyes, it did not look like a human's eyes. Because it was too cold, there was not a trace of emotion in it. It was even more cold and emotionless than Yan Juexing's cold eyes. Inside the cave, there was a desolate, ancient, and incomparably awe-inspiring majestic aura. This caused third brother Exian, who was guarding the cave entrance, to be endlessly shocked. He couldn't resist and knelt down towards the cave entrance. If it wasn't for the fact that the majestic aura had been intentionally restrained, such an awe-inspiring aura would probably have been sensed by everyone in Spirit Fragrance Valley the moment it rushed out of the cave. That was a kind of unquestionable majestic aura that didn't need to be shown. Yan Juexing seemed to be accepting the judgment of fate. He closed his eyes and slowly raised his head to face the sky with a pious expression. The 2 slender and cold huge eyes slowly stared at Yan Juexing, who was kneeling with his head held high. Yan Juexing immediately felt a strong pressure wrapping around him. He did not even have the strength to lift a finger. It was as if his whole body was going to be crushed into powder in an instant. Suddenly, a black light shot out from the 2 huge eyes and directly entered the blood-red vertical scar on Yan Juexing's forehead. The blood-red vertical scar instantly became alive. The red light overflowed and shone, as if a third eye was really going to grow on his forehead. After the cold and huge eyes finished doing this, they gradually dispersed into a rotating black light. They gradually shrank, as if they were going to disappear. Suddenly, the shrinking black light paused for a moment, then began to expand again, turning into a pair of huge eyes. The cold eyes seemed to have a little bit of humanity. They stared at Yan Juexing and actually revealed an expression of contemplation. After a while, it seemed to have thought of something. It once again shot out a black light and wrapped Yan Juexing's whole body. After the black light was completely annihilated into Yan Juexing's body, the eyes dispersed into a black light again. It rapidly rotated and shrank until it was the size of a bean. Then, it suddenly disappeared. In an instant, the majestic and oppressive desolate and ancient terrifying aura in the cave disappeared without a trace. Only then did Yan Juexing dare to open his eyes. He looked around with a hint of excitement hidden in his eyes. Although he didn't know what had happened just now and was only doing it according to the records in the demonic book, it was the first time he deeply experienced the extraordinariness and power of the great demonic book. Such a powerful aura, too powerful. He didn't expect that casting a spell could actually condense such a powerful aura. Not only did it suppress his body, but it also suppressed his thoughts of resisting. One could tell the whole picture by looking at one spot. The demonic book actually had such power. Once it was mastered, who in the world could stop him? Yan Juexing's excited gaze froze. He forcefully stabilized his emotions. He knew that now wasn't the time to think about all sorts of things. A journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. The way of the king was to do what was in front of him first. With his hands behind his back, he slowly floated into the sky above the cave. The 7 young girls raised their heads. Their gazes followed his figure and looked up at him in a daze. Yan Juexing formed complicated hand seals and indifferently spat out word by word, "Light of the demon god, shine on the 7 stars." Lowly creatures, under the illumination of the demon god, contribute your lives and let the flower of the blood demon bloom even more brightly. The blood stain on his forehead that was overflowing with red light immediately attracted the gazes of the 7 young girls. The star-shaped patterns on their foreheads immediately resonated, and there was also a red light circulating on them. Suddenly, the red light on Yan Juexing's forehead turned into 7 red light beams and directly shot into the center of the star-shaped patterns on the foreheads of the 7 young girls. The red light on the foreheads of the 7 young girls flashed and disappeared along with the star-shaped patterns on their foreheads. An indescribable expression of pain instantly appeared on the faces of the 7 young girls. Their pale faces that had lost too much blood twisted into a hideous and twisted appearance. Their bodies couldn't stop trembling. The wound on his wrist that had already coagulated into a blood scab suddenly collapsed. Blood gushed out rapidly. What accompanied it was the red light mixed with the fresh blood that flowed continuously towards his closed palms. Once the flowing red light came into contact with the roots of the 7-star blood orchid, the entire blood orchid immediately seemed to be filled with life. The red leaves that were like silk wriggled and grew slowly. The 7 young girls seemed to be unable to bear the pain any longer. Ah! They desperately shook their heads and screamed. Her originally bare and smooth skin was rapidly aging at a visible speed, and wrinkles appeared on her skin. The shrill screams couldn't make Yan Juexing's ice-cold eyes produce a trace of pity. Even if the screams were extremely miserable, it couldn't make a ripple in his eyes. He was concentrating on the 7 7-star blood orchids that were growing rapidly. The young life was flowing away. The plump breasts that originally belonged to the young girls were gradually withering and shriveling. The youthful faces couldn't help but wrinkle. The black hair on their heads was turning from white to white. The thick smell of blood filled the entire cave. The mournful screams that were gradually weakening gradually became weak. They were actually already awake from the endless pain. Their eyes were flickering with fear. They actually wanted to resist, but they couldn't. There was a powerful force in their bodies that suppressed them to the point that they couldn't resist at all. The young girl standing at the side turned a deaf ear to this. She still had a silly smile on her face, as if everything had nothing to do with her. Yan Juexing, who was silently watching everything below, suddenly had his eyes lit up. He saw that the 7 pots of blood orchids that had become incomparably beautiful suddenly blossomed with 7 white spots. The white spots were wriggling and struggling with all their might. They trembled and tried hard to expand. After struggling for a while, the flower buds that could be hugged finally sprang open. The tender red stamen was delicate and beautiful, and the white petals continued to grow. Success. Yan Juexing, who was excited, was suddenly shocked again. If he let it continue to grow, it would bear a blood fruit soon. That wasn't what he wanted. He made a complicated gesture with his fingers. 7 black lights flicked into the wounds on the 7 people's wrists and immediately stopped the almost dried blood from flowing out. Yan Juexing landed among the 7 people. He took out a fully bloomed 7-star blood orchid from one of them. He then took out a flower pot and buried the blood orchid again. After a while, the 7 pots of blood orchids were collected. At this point, Yan Juexing was completely relieved and let out a sigh of relief. He glanced coldly at the 7 people who had turned from young girls to white-haired old women. He suddenly opened his arms, and the 7 people swayed. They couldn't help but open their mouths. The 7 black snakes that were swallowed by them came out of their mouths again. After the 7 black snakes scuttled in the air, Yan Juexing opened his arms and clenched his fists. As his knuckles cracked, the 7 black snakes exploded into a black mist. Yan Juexing opened his mouth and took a deep breath. The black mist was sucked into his mouth like a flowing cloud. The 7 blood vessels that were shining with red light also nimbly drilled into his nostrils. Without the restriction, the 7 people who had turned from young girls to old women could no longer support their bodies. They swayed and fell down one after another. Each of them lay on the ground and stared at Yan Juexing weakly. All of them had a pleading look in their eyes. However, they begged the wrong person. Yan Juexing glanced at them coldly and said expressionlessly, "You don't have much life left. Living is even more painful. Why don't I do a good deed and give you a quick death? In order to thank you for your contributions, I will leave your corpses intact." As he spoke, his body flashed in a circle like a ghost. There were 7 crisp sounds of bones breaking. In the blink of an eye, he stood in the same place and coldly glanced at the 7 people whose heads had already turned a few circles. "Third brother Exian, you can come in," Yan Juixing called out. Third brother Exian immediately came after hearing the news. When he saw the 7 white-haired old women lying on the ground, he couldn't help but be surprised. He didn't know what had happened to turn the 7 young girls into 7 old women. After his pupils shrank, he knew that there were some things he shouldn't ask. He bowed to Yan Juixing and said, "Master, what are your orders?" Yan Juixing said indifferently, "Take care of these 7 corpses. Don't let anyone find them." Third brother Exian respectfully accepted the order and put the corpses into the storage bag without saying anything. If they were alive, they would definitely die after being put into the storage bag. This was because the flesh and blood of living people couldn't adapt to the space in the storage bag. However, if they were dead, then there was no need to worry. They were already dead. "Wait." Yan Juixing stopped third brother Exian, who was about to leave. He squinted his eyes and said, "I almost forgot something important. Let me ask you, when Lanfeng left, did he take the 2 women that Yu Qianqiu arranged with him?" Third brother Exian respectfully replied, "No, only when Lanfeng left. The 2 women seemed to be staying in Lingfang Valley for a while. Enchantress of 100 Charms and Yan Yu of Sleeping Spring Loft. How did this Yu Qianqiu get involved with Yan Yu? Isn't Yan Yu Niu Yud's woman?" Yan Juixing muttered to himself for a while and then sneered, "Be it Yu Qianqiu or Niu Yud, I will settle the score with them sooner or later. Find a suitable opportunity and find a way to bring those 2 women over. Even if it's just to stick a nail in their side, it will be useful sooner or later. Yes. I will find a way to bring them over." Third brother Exian replied. "Be careful. You must do it under the premise of safety. Otherwise, don't act rashly. By the way." Yan Juixing looked at third brother Exian and said with a faint smile, "I heard that you have a few brothers with extraordinary cultivation. Anyway, you can't handle it alone. If there's a suitable opportunity, why don't you bring them to meet me one by one?" Chapter 675. Even though third Exian was controlled, he was still clear-headed and understood what he meant. He bowed and said, "My brothers will be happy to serve master. Don't disturb your 9th brother who is at the early stage of soul severing, just in case there's a misunderstanding. Do you understand?" Yan Juixing asked. The main reason was that with his current cultivation, the demon I can't control cultivators who have reached soul severing. "I understand, I won't let him know." Third Exian said obediently. Yan Juixing nodded with satisfaction, smiled and asked, "Everyone says your master is the most beautiful woman in the world. I'm also very curious, but I never had the chance to meet her. Why don't you tell me, just how beautiful is your master?" Third brother Exian was taken aback. "My master is beautiful, and everyone says so. But this subordinate doesn't think she is as beautiful as everyone says. In this subordinate's opinion, my master is a bit scary." "Scary?" Yan Juixing was also stunned, then looked at third Exian like he's looking at a monster, and slowly understood what was going on. No matter how beautiful a woman is, they can't stand seeing each other every day. Maybe in the eyes of others, she's a beauty, but in the eyes of someone like third Exian who has been with his master for hundreds of years, no matter how beautiful she is, she's just ordinary. Then he thought about himself. His mother Bai Hua Fairy is also a publicly recognized beauty. To him, she seems to have the beauty of a mother, but he doesn't think she's that beautiful. Instead, when he sees other women, he thinks they're more beautiful. But what he doesn't understand is why third Exian thinks Lu Yanqing is scary. Could it be that Lu Yanqing has a bad temper and often punishes him? Actually, Yan Juixing guessed it right. Third Exian has been the wildest among his brothers since he was young. He often caused trouble, so Lu Yanqing punished him a lot. Over time, Lu Yanqing became the only one who could deal with him. He was scared of Lu Yanqing since he was young, so it would be strange if he wasn't afraid of her. Outside the garden of quiet guest house, Wu Sihai paced around alone for a while. He didn't want to disturb Yu Qianzhou, and he also ordered others not to disturb him. Because for the sake of the clan's benefits, he wished for nothing more than for Wu Lixue and Yu Qianzhou's relationship to be as intimate as possible. He wished for nothing more than for the two of them to be inseparable. However, he could not withstand the pressure anymore. All the major sects had sent important figures to seek an audience with Yu Qianzhou. They urged him several times a day. Everyone was currently waiting for news on Hat Island. Although he didn't know if Yu Qianzhou was willing to see them or not, Wu Sihai had no choice. After all, the Wu family still had to deal with the other sects, they couldn't offend them at once. Because Yu Qianzhou was afraid that others would not be able to invite him, he had no choice but to do it himself. He hoped that Yu Qianzhou would give face to Wu Lixue and casually go out to meet everyone. At least he would be able to account to everyone. After some hesitation, he put his hands behind his back and walked in with a smile on his face. Walking to the quiet guest house, Wu Sihai coughed lightly and said in a clear voice, "Shua, As soon as he finished, he saw two heads poking out from the window upstairs. Yu Qianzhou and Wu Lixue looked at each other and jumped down from the window. Wu Lixue smiled and hugged Wu Sihai's arm. "Grandpa, why are you here?" Wu Sihai's eyes paused on the crow on Wu Lixue's shoulder, and surprise flashed. Then he looked at Wu Lixue, who was glowing, and smiled with satisfaction. Finally, he looked at Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands and smiled. "Greetings, Patriarch Wu." Because of his master, Bai Changchun, he was much higher than Wu Sihai in terms of seniority. But because of Wu Lixue, their relationship was messed up, so he called him Patriarch Wu instead of Senior. "It's quiet here, right? If there's anything you're not satisfied with, just say it." Wu Sihai smiled and looked around. These words caused Yu Qianzhou's face to redden. Not only was it peaceful, but you even offered your own granddaughter. How could I not be satisfied? He smiled awkwardly. "I'm satisfied. May I know why Patriarch Wu is here?" Wu Sihai didn't answer him, but looked at Wu Lixue. "Shua, your father and mother haven't seen you for a few days. You should go and greet them, lest they worry." Wu Lixue looked at Yu Qianzhou, as if unwilling to be separated from him. Wu Sihai smiled bitterly in his heart. Girls really leave their husbands, girls can't stay at home. Yu Qianzhou knew that Wu Sihai must have something to say to him alone, so he smiled and said to Wu Lixue, "Greet your parents for me, I'll visit them when I'm free." He said it with a guilty conscience. When was he not free these days? It was just that he slept with their daughter early, and he was afraid that it would be awkward to meet them, so he consciously avoided them. Wu Lixue replied with a "n" and slowly left. There was no one else in the garden, so Wu Sihai sized up the young man in front of him again and couldn't help but sigh. The scum of the cultivation world that was chased by all the sects was now a distinguished guest that all the sects fought to invite. The world was truly like a game of chess, changing constantly. Yu Qianzhou saw that Wu Sihai wanted to say something but hesitated, and he more or less guessed the reason for his visit. All the sects had probably sent people to look for him. In fact, this was also the reason why he appeared in the Wu clan in such a high-profile manner, so there was nothing strange about it. He couldn't help but smile. "Is Patriarch Wu looking for me? If you have anything to say, just say it. I'm all ears." Wu Sihai smiled bitterly and shook his head. He sighed and said, "Then I won't beat around the bush. All the sects sent people to look for you, and they are all gathered at Hat Island. I know about the grudges between you and them, so my Wu clan doesn't plan to interfere with the matters between you and them. However, everyone can see that you are here, and all the sects came to look for our Wu clan, asking us to pass the message to you. You see, I have no other choice, so I came to look for you. What's wrong with that?" Yu Qianzhou waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "Just tell them directly that I'm not interested in meeting them and ask them to scram." Wu Sihai was immediately displeased. This kid was clearly pretending to be ignorant. I came to look for you personally because I want you to show yourself and not make things difficult for my Wu clan. You actually don't give me face? Since you don't give me face, then don't blame me for relying on my status as Shue's grandfather to take advantage of my seniority. Wu Sihai's face darkened slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "You Qianqiu, if you want them to scram, that's your business. You should tell them personally. My Wu clan can't afford to be a villain. Even if you don't give me face, you should give Shue's face, right? Don't forget that Shue's surname is also Wu. Don't make things difficult for my Wu clan." The old man's temper was rather great. Yu Qianqiu was delighted in his heart. He was waiting for Wu Sihai to make things clear so that he could seize the opportunity to do him a favor at little cost. This way, he wouldn't feel guilty for taking advantage of the Wu clan. This way, both parties' mentality would be more balanced. However, on the surface, he wasn't too happy and said, "Since Wu clan head has made things clear, then what else can I say? Even if I don't give anyone face, I can't not give you face. However, they don't have the qualifications to ask me to meet them. After all, I'm not a member of the Cultivation Alliance anymore. It's not their turn to order me around. If they want to meet me, let them come over themselves. This request of mine isn't too much, right?" Wu Sihai pondered for a moment. In the cultivation world, it was about who was stronger. There was no reason to ask the strong to lower their heads to the weak. Yu Qianqiu's words weren't too much. Thus, he nodded silently and said, "All right, it's settled then. I'll let them come here." Without saying anything else, he turned around and left. Not long after, there were over 100 people standing in the quiet garden of the quiet guest house. They were all from the top sects in China's cultivation world. There were over 100 people in different attire gathered in front of the building. They stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the stairs with his hands behind his back. For a moment, no one said anything. Even though everyone was mentally prepared, they still didn't feel good when they saw this young man again. There was a saying that the river flows east for 30 years and west for 30 years, but it hadn't even been 30 years, right? That scum that everyone wanted to beat up in the past had appeared in front of everyone again. He had already become the #1 expert below the soul formation stage and was looking at them arrogantly with the attitude of an expert. No matter how hard it was to accept, they had to face reality. In the cultivation world, whoever was strong had the final say. Moreover, all the sects needed his help, so they had no choice but to accept this fact silently. However, the way everyone looked at the people from supporting Immortal Island was a little ridiculous. The person on the stairs could have grown into a pillar of the supporting Immortal Island and shelter it from the wind and rain. In the end, he was chased out of the supporting Immortal Island by them. Now, they were asking for the disciple who was chased out of the sect. If this wasn't a joke, then what was? This was called reaping what he sowed. Yu Qianqiu looked at everyone condescendingly. How could he not be filled with emotions? He thought about the difficulties when he first joined the Quansang sect, how he had to hide when he was chased by various sects, and now he was looking at everyone from a high position. Although the ups and downs in the cultivation world were normal, it undoubtedly proved that his hard work over the years hadn't been in vain. He had finally fought for a place in the cultivation world. Most of the people below the stairs had seen him before. Even if he wasn't familiar with them, he had at least met them once. However, what surprised him the most was Qiu Wuyuan naturally represented the 10,000 demons while Dongfang Chang Heo naturally represented the supporting Immortal Island. It seemed like there was someone standing between the two of them who shouldn't be there. It was the principal elder of the supporting Immortal Island's myriad fragrance garden, Ferdinand. Yu Qianqiu's first reaction was that the supporting Immortal Island had already found out about the matter between him and Furong. The purpose of sending Ferdinand here was self-evident. At the same time, the purpose of everyone's visit was also obvious. A group of people who were ignorant and narrow-minded. They suddenly knew how terrifying the outside world was and that they could be devoured at any time. This was related to their own interests, so they couldn't sit still anymore. I heard from the Wu clan's master that all of you are here to look for me. May I know why you are looking for me? Yu Qianqiu asked indifferently with an expressionless face. Chapter 676. Since the silence had been broken, someone had to speak first. The so-called number one sect in the world, Fuxian Island, was about to play its role. Dongfang Cheng Ao looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated gaze and cupped his fists with difficulty. Yu Qianqiu, you've been roaming around the various countries for many years. I'm sure you know the situation of the Chinese cultivation world better than us. The Chinese cultivation world is now in a precarious situation. The soul formation stage masters of the various countries are like sharp swords hanging above our heads. Once they make a move, the various sects won't be able to fight back at all. Yu Qianqiu frowned. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with me, right? Brother Yu, you can't say that. Qiu Wuyuan also awkwardly cupped his hands and said, no matter what, you are still a part of China's cultivation world. Are you really willing to watch China's cultivation world be destroyed by foreign enemies? I really don't see why you guys are looking for me. If the soul formation stage masters want to make a move, I won't be able to stop them even if I want to. I'm sure you guys know this. Yu Qianqiu continued to play dumb. May I know why so many of you are looking for me? Dongfang Cheng Ao said righteously, we're here to talk to you on behalf of the Chinese Cultivation Alliance. No matter what, you're a part of the Chinese cultivation world. It's only right for you to stand up in times of crisis. It would have been fine if Yu Qianqiu hadn't said that, but the moment he said that, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sneer. Old man Dongfang, how dare you say something like that? When you can't use me, you can't wait to kill me. Now that you're asking me to stand up in times of crisis, you're really reasonable. Oh. So you guys are here on behalf of the Chinese Cultivation Alliance. That's a lot of representatives. Yu Qianqiu seemed to be counting the number of people as he glanced at everyone one by one. It was good to talk to Yu Qianqiu in order to protect the Chinese cultivation world, but no one thought that Yu Qianqiu could protect the entire Chinese cultivation world by himself. However, with his relationship with some soul formation stage masters, it wouldn't be a problem for him to bring one or two top soul formation stage masters over to protect a sect. This was the reason why everyone had gathered here. As for those small sects that were too weak, they knew their limits. They knew that they couldn't compete with those big sects even if they came. Anyway, there were already enough people representing the Cultivation Alliance on this trip. This made Dongfang Cheng Ao a bit embarrassed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dragged Ferdinand, who was in charge of the spiritual herb garden. Sigh. Although when the Chinese cultivation world had any benefits, it was all taken by your sects and had nothing to do with me. But at the critical moment, you guys finally thought of me. It's not easy. Yu Qianqiu was full of sarcasm and didn't leave any face. If he said such words in the past, a lot of people would jump out and beat him up. But now, everyone had to listen even if they didn't want to. Strength, determined attitude. But everyone's face had been tested for a long time. They knew what they could listen to and what they could pretend not to hear. Many people lowered their heads to look for ants. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the group of people who didn't speak and sneered, okay. You guys are heartless, but I can't be unjust. Just like Elder Dongfang said, I'm also a member of the Chinese cultivation world. So I promised the Cultivation Alliance that I'm ready to stand up in times of danger, but I can't guarantee that I can help. That's all I have to say. If there's nothing else, you can leave. As soon as he finished speaking, he went back to the building and sat on the rocking chair in the hall, smiling at the people outside. The remaining group of people looked at each other. What was the difference between what Yu Qianqiu said and not saying? If everyone left like this, how could they explain it to the sects when they went back? But he had already agreed to the Cultivation Alliance without hesitation. What excuse could they use to stay? Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on the rocking chair, closed his eyes gently. One of his favorite things to do was to tear off the disguise of those righteous people who were covered with a sanctimonious veil and slowly enjoy their ugly behavior. The group of people outside looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on the rocking chair, and all of them gnashed their teeth in hatred. Unfortunately, things were different now. and they couldn't do anything to him. Dongfang Chang Ao was also speechless. His words were blocked by Yu Qianqiu. He represented Fuxian Island, and it was not good for him to do anything in public. He could only transmit his voice to Ferdinand next to him. Elder Ferdinand, it's up to you now. Ferdinand smiled bitterly and helplessly. He braced himself to find an excuse and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, do you still recognize me? His voice attracted everyone's attention. Damn! My dear father-in-law, how are you? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. This Fuxian Island was indeed the #1 sect in the world. The resources in their hands were so rich that they could even bring out his future father-in-law. It couldn't be helped. His future father-in-law was acting, and he had to cooperate. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on the rocking chair, suddenly opened his eyes and stared at Ferdinand outside. After looking for a while, he revealed a look of disbelief. He suddenly stood up and strode out of the door. He said in surprise, Are you Elder Fei of Wanfen Garden? Haha. That's me. I didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to still remember me, Ferdinand said with a smile. It's really Elder Fei. I thought I saw wrongly just now. Back then in Fuxian Island, Elder Fei had always taken care of me, and I will never forget it. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and led the way into the house. He said with a smile, I haven't seen Elder Fei for a long time. It's a good time to catch up. Please come in. Ferdinand followed him into the house with a smile. Everyone watched the two of them disappear in the hall. There were not many people who knew about the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and Furong even in Fuxian Island. It should be known that this was an important secret of Fuxian Island that was strictly guarded, and only some of the higher-ups knew about it. Dongfang Chang Ao, who knew about it, was completely speechless when he saw the two of them acting. It really looked like that was the case. Qiu Wuyuan silently turned around and stared at Dongfang Chang Ao. He said through telepathy, Brother Dongfang, it seems that the relationship between Elder Fei and Yu Qianqiu is not ordinary. Fuxian Island is really not comparable to ordinary sections. They even dug out the principal elder of Wanfen Garden who rarely leaves the island. They really put in a lot of effort. Not only Qiu Wuyuan, but the others also stared at Dongfang Chang Ao with jealousy in their eyes. Dongfang Chang Ao was too lazy to say anything more. He didn't want to stay here anymore. Anyway, he couldn't solve any problem by staying here. Everything depended on Ferdinand. He then turned around and walked out of the crowd. On the upper floor of the quiet guest house, Yu Qianqiu casually set up a soundproof enchantment. Ferdinand, who was beside him, saw his action and nodded. He said, It seems that the rumor is right. Your cultivation has indeed reached the tribulation stage. Your progress is amazing. Yu Qianqiu turned around and said with a smile, Fuxian Island used you as a lobbyist. How are you going to convince me? I don't need to be secretive with you. Fernand was silent for a while before he said with a solemn expression, This time, the supporting Immortal Island has shown great sincerity. If you're willing to return to the supporting Immortal Island, after a discussion within the sect, we'll give you the position of the chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island. In other words, once the current sect leader retires, you will take over the position of the sect leader of Fuxian Island if there are no major accidents. I think this condition is very good. You can really consider it seriously. Chapter 677. Yu Qianqiu was not in a hurry to reply to him. He smiled and asked him to sit down first. He also sat beside him with a smile and did not speak. There was a tea table between the two of them. There was no tea on the tea table, but Yu Qianqiu took out a pot of good wine as tea. He poured a cup for Ferdinand and said, This wine is not ordinary. It is the 100-fruit wine given by a monster king in the monster domain. There are not many people in the cultivation world who can drink it. Try this wine and see how it tastes. Although Ferdinand did not know his real identity in the monster domain, he knew that he had a relationship with the ghost general in the monster domain. So, what he said must be true. He did not stand on ceremony with him. He picked up the wine cup and drank it. The cool wine that moistened his mouth slid into his stomach. Immediately, a warm feeling surged and spread to his limbs and bones. His whole body was refreshed, and the fragrance lingered in his mouth. Ferdinand smacked his lips and nodded. It is indeed a good wine. Yu Qianqiu smiled and filled his cup again. Ferdinand stared at his action with a gratified look on his face. He asked, "What I said just now, have you considered it? It's rare to see you. Why do you talk to me about business as soon as we meet?" Yu Qianqiu joked. "I thought you would ask about Furong first. We will talk about Furong later." Ferdinand sighed and said, "The supporting Immortal Island is still waiting for my reply. If I don't clear up your matter first, my heart will also be in a mess. The entire higher-ups of the supporting Immortal Island have high hopes for me. I see that you seem to be very anxious. Is this matter important to you?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "How can it not be important? Since I stepped into the cultivation world, I have always been in the supporting Immortals Island. The supporting Immortals Island is my sect, and it can be said that it is the place where I have taken root in my life. Now that the sect is facing a crisis, how can I turn a blind eye?" After Ferdinand finished speaking, he urged, "The conditions given to you are already very good, and this is because you used to be a disciple of the supporting Immortals Island. If it were someone else, they would not give such conditions. What do you think?" Yu Qianqiu sat upright and said, "I originally wanted to get personal with you, but you insisted on talking about official business. Since you insist on doing this, then we'll toss our personal relationship to the side and deal with official business." Ferdinand stared blankly for a moment. Then, his complexion gradually turned somewhat dark as he said in a deep voice, "Don't play this game with me. Put away your evil thoughts. If I really wanted to talk business with you, supporting Immortal Island wouldn't have asked me to talk to you." Yu Qianqiu chuckled and slumped down again. He leaned back on the chair and smiled lazily. "All right, I don't dare to make you unhappy. Let's have a discussion that's both public and private. What do you think? At least you know what's good for you." Ferdinand snorted coldly. "Since it's not all business, I'll have to rely on our personal relationship to get some insider information first." Yu Qianqiu asked sneakily, "As far as I know, the supporting Immortals Island is also divided into factions fighting for power. It's not as calm as it looks on the surface. The chief elder is such an important position, and it's related to the candidate for the next sect leader. It's the biggest piece of fat meat. How can they be willing to give it to an outsider like me?" Ferdinand paused and explained, "Isn't it a critical juncture now? We're not 3-year-old children. We're all people who know the big picture. Naturally, we have to get through the difficulties together." Yu Qianqiu made a long non-committally with a sneer on his face. The more people there were in a sect, especially the sects that were divided into factions, the more people would fight for a higher position. Things like knowing the big picture and getting through the difficulties together were nonsense. Some people who were blinded by greed would often not think about knowing the big picture unless they were at the point of death. As the saying goes, when the forest is big, there are all kinds of birds. Yu Qianqiu did not believe that the opinions of so many people in the supporting Immortals Island could be so unified. He said expressionlessly, "No wonder the supporting Immortals Island can become the #1 sect in the world." He was too lazy to finish his words. If Ferdinand was not stupid, he would naturally understand. Sure enough, Ferdinand smiled bitterly. He knew that this guy had a problem with his dishonesty. He sighed and said, "Hibiscus showed up in the cornucopia and was recognized by the people sent by the supporting Immortals Island. When the news came back, it's not a big deal to let Hibiscus leave the supporting Immortals Island without permission with my identity as the principal elder of the Wanfen Garden. But when I left the Chinese cultivation world, many people found an excuse, including the sect leader Feng Shangtian. They all blamed me. When they were discussing how to punish me, it was Aunt Zhou who stood up and helped me out." "Ma Zhou?" Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said in a low voice, "Could it be that me returning to the supporting Immortals Island to be the chief elder is related to Aunt Zhou?" Ferdinand showed a look of approval. He thought that this guy's keen perception of people and matters was really not something an ordinary person could compare to. He nodded and said, apart from Aunt Jo, who else would dare to say that to you to be the chief elder of the supporting Immortals Island? Naturally, many people objected, but you also know the power of the Guan clan in the supporting Immortals Island. Once Aunt Jo spoke, the Guan clan's power naturally gave their full support. After that, Aunt Jo personally mentioned me and asked me to pull you back to the supporting Immortals Island. That's roughly what happened. Yu Qianqiu sneered. Sure enough, people become shrewd with age. This Ma Jiu really had a good plan. Back when he was on the supporting Immortals Island, she tried to pull him back, but he refused, saying that he already had a master, and that he was an expert in the demon domain. Now, it seemed that the Chinese cultivation world had also begun to spy on various countries. She probably guessed that his master was the world's #1 expert in the demon domain, so she didn't hesitate to pull him back. He had already refused Ma Jiu once, so she knew that ordinary people couldn't persuade him. Coincidentally, Furong's matter was exposed. When everyone wanted to punish Ferdinand, Ma Jiu came forward to protect Ferdinand, using the carrot and stick method to force Ferdinand to find him. Probably, even Ferdinand himself didn't know the reason, so he must be thinking about how to repay Ma Jiu. Yu Qianqiu's expression gradually turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, I don't dare to be the chief elder of the supporting Immortals Island. You can go back and tell Ma Jiu that I thank her for her kindness. There's one more thing, I'll have to trouble you to pass on to Ma Jiu. Seeing that he flatly refused to go back to the supporting Immortals Island, Ferdinand's expression turned somewhat unsightly. He pulled a long face and said, Is there anything you want me to tell her? I have a friend in the secular world, Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. He's the pillar general of the Hua Xia Empire, named Shi Wenguang. Due to the persecution of the Li dynasty, he had no choice but to gather an army. Recently, he decided to command the army and overthrow the tyranny of the Li dynasty. I'm in favor of this matter. I hope Elder Fei can tell this to Ma Jiu after you go back. I believe she will understand what I mean and make appropriate arrangements. Chapter 678. Hearing that, Ferdinand couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up and shouted, Yu Qianqiu. What are you trying to do? The imperial power of the Hua Xia Empire was the exclusive property of Fu Xian Island, and the benefits were self-evident. Any disciple of Fu Xian Island could do anything within the borders of the Hua Xia Empire with just a word. Anything that happened in the secular world could be settled with just a word. At the same time, the imperial power of the Li clan acted as the eyes of Fu Xian Island in the secular world. Many corners that even cultivators couldn't reach, Fu Xian Island had ways to keep an eye on them. This was the benefit of holding the imperial power hostage. Most importantly, the people of China could let Fu Xian Island pick the best disciple, and they had the first pick condition compared to other sections. Don't underestimate this benefit. This was the foundation that maintained the prosperity of Fu Xian Island. As long as there were successors, there was no need to worry about there being no new talents rising. Now that Yu Qianqiu actually said that he wanted to overthrow the imperial power of China, how could Ferdinand not know the consequences of this, as he was also a high-level figure of Fu Xian Island? Haha. Why are you making such a fuss? Yu Qianqiu smiled disapprovingly. It's a matter of course for the emperor to take turns. It doesn't make sense for anyone to be the emperor forever. Don't be anxious. It's useless even if you are anxious. You can't make the decision anyway. Just pass the message to Ma Jiu. Let the people who should worry about it worry. Ferdinand said angrily, You are taking advantage of the precarious situation of the sects to threaten Fu Xian Island. I definitely don't mean to threaten. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and drank the wine in front of him. He played with the wine cup and said indifferently, Didn't you say that cultivators can't intervene in the secular world's affairs? If the secular people want to fight for the world, let them fight. Who wins and who loses depends on their own ability. We shouldn't intervene. But then again, if someone interferes, don't blame me for being impolite. Ferdinand stared at him with flickering eyes. Suddenly, He sneered and said, "You Qianqiu, I really didn't expect you to have such a big ambition. You actually set your sights on the whole world. I just don't understand. Isn't it better for you to join supporting Immortal Island? If I become the sect master of supporting Immortal Island one day, wouldn't it be easier for me to take over the entire world? One day?" Yu Qianqiu sneered, "If I say that my ambition is not for the whole world, but for the people of the world, will you believe me?" Full of loopholes. Ferdinand said sarcastically, "Once the war comes, how many people will lose their families and break up their families? Is this what you mean by caring for the common people?" "Yes. You're right. But I don't think this is a reason for the cultivation world to interfere with the secular world." Yu Qianqiu stood up, looked out of the window, and said slowly, "A short pain is better than a long one. It's difficult to change the world without killing people." He turned around and said to Ferdinand, "Who can guarantee that they will always be in power? If the descendants of Furong and I are reduced to the level of ordinary people one day, they will live under layers of oppression and want to resist, but because of the cultivation world's intervention, they will never be able to stand up, and their descendants will be oppressed forever without a chance to resist. Do you still think it's right for the cultivation world to control the power of the secular world for their own interests?" Ferdinand's expression changed slightly. The situation Yu Qianqiu said was not impossible, but very likely. After all, not everyone's descendants had the aptitude for cultivation. Take supporting Immortal Island for example, there were also descendants of elders who were reduced to ordinary people. When the elders were alive, they could take care of them, but once they died for many years, who would care about them? Yu Qianqiu continued with a smile, "The matters of our descendants are too far away, and we can't make arrangements for our descendants in the future. Whether they are poor or rich, noble or humble, they need to rely on their own efforts to get rid of and fight for it. But the strong intervention of the cultivation world has made many ordinary people have no chance to change their fate. The emperor's family is at the bottom, and the country is made of iron, so he can do whatever he wants to the ordinary people. To the common people, the cultivation world was an unreasonable existence. So I think that the cultivation world is the cultivation world, and the secular world is the secular world, and the two are absolutely not allowed to mix together." Ferdinand was silent, and the room became quiet. Yu Qianqiu looked at him with a smile. After a long time, Ferdinand asked in a deep voice, "What you just said is your real opinion?" Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "I admit that I'm not such a noble person, so it's still too early to make a conclusion about whether it's true or false. You might as well wait and see it with your own eyes." Ferdinand stared at the grinning Yu Qianqiu with a burning gaze for a while before he suddenly sighed and said, "My ability is limited, so I can't change anything. But remember to treat Furong well, or else I'll curse you forever." After saying that, he removed the soundproof enchantment laid by Yu Qianqiu and strode away. Yu Qianqiu followed him with a grin and said, "I'll send you off." Ferdinand suddenly turned around and said in a deep voice, "The wine just now was really bad. It's bitter. Do you have any more? Let me take some back to drink." Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment before he nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, yes, yes." Then, he took out more than a dozen jars in a row. Ferdinand also didn't stand on ceremony. He took all of them and left resolutely. Yu Qianqiu followed behind him eagerly. The group of people downstairs had yet to disperse. When they saw the two of them going downstairs, they saw Yu Qianqiu send the gloomy Ferdinand directly to the garden of the quiet guest house. Looking at Ferdinand leaving, Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. He knew that the old guy would definitely bear a lot of pressure when he went back. At least, he couldn't avoid some people's accusations. However, some things were like this. If one wanted to succeed, there would always be many people who would sacrifice for it. After returning to the courtyard, he glanced at the crowd and walked directly into the building as if he didn't see anything. When he passed by Qiu Wuyuan finally couldn't help but shout, "Brother Yu, please wait." Yu Qianqiu stopped and looked at him with a smile. "Brother Qiu, what's the matter? Let's talk about it upstairs." He was straightforward, but Qiu Wuyuan didn't expect it to be so simple. He was more or less surprised. When the others saw this, they immediately followed suit and rushed forward, shouting, "Yu Qianshou, I also have something to talk to you about. I'm here on the order of the sect." "Yu Qianshou, I won't disturb you for too long." Yu Qianshou glanced at the crowd coldly and accidentally found a woman at the back of the crowd who didn't squeeze in. Perhaps because she was a woman, it was inconvenient for her to rub and push with a group of men. She was looking at them anxiously. However, Yu Qianshou knew this woman. She was Hua Rui of the Moon Clan. "Elder Hua of the Moon Clan, stay. The rest of you can leave. We can talk later," Yu Qianshou said to the crowd. Hua Rui looked at Yu Qianshou and nodded happily. After being stunned for a moment, the crowd immediately became restless. They all shouted, "Yu Qianshou, this is good for you. Yu Qianshou. Let me finish, if you don't scram, I don't mind killing a few of you," Yu Qianshou shouted with a fierce look. When he said this, the garden immediately quieted down. Everyone looked at each other. Yu Qianshou was known as the butcher of the cultivation world. It was said that he killed people like flies and never showed mercy. He even killed a few cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation stage. "Do you really think I don't dare to do it?" Yu Qianshou threatened again. At this point, no one dared to stay to verify the truth of his words. They all left the garden hesitantly. Yu Qianshou stared at the figures leaving through the gate and snorted. Sometimes, using force was better than talking reason. Then, he nodded at Hua Rui and Xiao Wuyuan, gesturing for them to follow him. The two hurriedly followed him upstairs. The garden finally returned to the peace it deserved. In the room where he talked to Ferdinand, Yu Qianshou set up a soundproof wizardry barrier again. Xiao Wuyuan and Hua Rui looked at each other in surprise. They both confirmed that Yu Qianshou's cultivation had indeed broken through to the tribulation stage. The rumor was indeed true. "I know why you are here." Yu Qianshou was honest. He looked at Xiao Wuyuan and said with a smile, "I can understand the Moon Clan, but the 10,000 demons don't have to be too anxious. Yan Bugui is the son of the previous leader of the 10,000 demons after all. I think he won't make things difficult for the 10,000 demons. And that Yan Zhuixing, he is very powerful now. He is the disciple of Bing Qingzi, a semi-god realm cultivator. No one in the world dares to disrespect Bing Qingzi. Whoever wants to touch the 10,000 demons will have to think twice." Xiao Wuyuan smiled bitterly. "Yu Qianshou, I know you have a grudge against senior brother and Yan Bugui. But this is a different matter. The 10,000 demons have nothing to do with them. Besides, you should also know that even if they want to protect the 10,000 demons, they won't be able to. Yan Zhuixing can't even take care of himself. All the countries are sending people to capture him. And my senior brother. Sigh. Not long ago, I just got the news that the Wuji Island has been occupied. My senior brother escaped the Wuji Island under the protection of the Ice Palace disciples. His whereabouts are still unknown. Although Yu Qianshou didn't know the news of the Wuji Island, Yan Bugui's ending was within his expectations. Since all the countries were trying to capture Yan Zhuixing, how could the Wuji Island let his father, Yan Bugui, make the decision? Even if the Ice Palace wanted to protect him, the Blue Palace and the other major forces wouldn't give them face. It was already a great fortune that Yan Bugui was able to escape. Yu Qianshou looked at the two and smiled. Everyone knows what's going on. There are some things that I'm too embarrassed to say. Let me put it this way. Previously, the supporting Immortal Island promised me that as long as I returned to the island, they would let me be the chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island. But I rejected it. Could it be that the two of you have more favorable conditions than the supporting Immortal Island? The two were slightly shocked. They didn't expect the supporting Immortal Island to be so generous. The chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island was usually the next sect master of the island. Yu Qianshou even rejected this condition. When the two thought about the conditions they brought, they couldn't bring themselves to say it. Although the room was quiet, the atmosphere was a little restless. After waiting for a while, Yu Qianshou smiled. Actually, there are always things in this world that can move people. It just depends on whether it's to your liking. For example, I have some unresolved grudges with the Deluo sect. If someone can help me eradicate the Deluo sect, I think I will definitely repay the kindness. Chapter 679. What? Qiu Weiyuan and Hua Rui couldn't help but exclaim. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile, but a fierce look flashed in his eyes. Actually, with his current strength, he could go to the Luo sect alone, but it would be difficult to completely wipe them out. Even if he used all his strength, the Luo sect's deep roots wouldn't be easy to deal with. Moreover, who knew how many tribulation-passing experts were hidden among them? Even if they couldn't beat him, they could at least escape, right? If he wanted to wipe out the Luo sect, he couldn't let those experts escape. Otherwise, they could rise again at any time. Such a large-scale operation required an equally large faction to take action. One was the number 1 sect in the demonic path, while the other was number 3 in the righteous path. If the two joined forces, the Luo sect would definitely lose. Actually, Yu Qianqiu had thought of asking supporting Immortal Island for help, but they definitely wouldn't be willing. Supporting Immortal Island would rather give up their worldly power than make a move on the Luo sect. Otherwise, not only would it damage the righteous path's strength, but supporting Immortal Island would also lose the right to continue leading the righteous path. Yu Qianqiu, what kind of hatred do you have with the Luo sect that you would want to wipe them out? Hua Rui asked with a frown. Yu Qianqiu's smile turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, when I first joined on Kwangsung, my master died at the hands of the Luo sect. Back then, I swore on my master's corpse that I would avenge him. Is that reason enough? There was another reason he didn't say, and that was that Shi Wenguang was about to send out his troops. He chose this time to cause trouble for the Luo sect to cause chaos in China's cultivation world. This was to prevent people from getting too comfortable and increasing the pressure on Shi Wenguang. As long as the cultivation world was stabilized, he had no doubts about Shi Wenguang's ability to fight a war. Only when Shi Wenguang controlled the entire Hua Xia Empire would he have more resources for him to prepare for war. Otherwise, the western border wouldn't be able to arm an army to conquer the world. Another thing was that now was the best time to fish in troubled waters. Once Bai Changchun went to the East Holy Land, he would be able to take advantage of the situation. When the various countries' forces arrived, no one could say what the situation would be like. Therefore, now was the perfect time to target the exalted sect. Hua Rui was speechless. Since Yu Qianqiu had sworn an oath, it seemed like he was determined to take action against the Daluo sect. Qiu Weiyuan's gaze flickered. If it was during normal times when there were no external enemies, this wouldn't be a bad thing for the 10,000 demons. If they could eradicate the forces of the righteous path, the 10,000 demons would be more than willing to do so. But now, it was time for them to deal with a foreign enemy together, so it was a little difficult. I'm afraid we'll be scorned by the entire cultivation world if we make a move against the exalted sect now. Qiu Weiyuan looked at Yu Qianqiu and snickered. I'm afraid Fuxian Island and their righteous comrades will not just sit back and do nothing, right? It seemed like this guy was more or less tempted. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, since when did the 10,000 demons become so timid? If you're really willing to help me, the other problems are not a problem. I'll step forward and settle it. I'd like to see who wants to go against me. If you're not willing to help me, that's fine too. There will naturally be others who will be more than happy to help. I don't believe that without Butcher Zhang, we'll have to eat pigs with hair on them. Qiu Weiyuan looked at Hua Rui and said hesitantly, this matter is too big. I'm afraid it's not something the two of us can make the decision. Hua Rui nodded silently. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, I'm not counting on the two of you to make the decision. I'll give you 1 day. I'll wait for your reply in 1 day. If you're late, I won't wait. With that said, he lifted his hand and removed the soundproof barrier, sending the guests off. The two of them did not stay and hurriedly left. This matter had to be reported to the sect as soon as possible. Yu Qianqiu walked to the window and watched the two of them leave the garden. After that, he fell into deep thought. Then, he closed the window and disappeared from the room. The capital of the Xia Empire was bustling and lively as usual. On both sides of a quiet street were rows upon rows of luxurious mansions. It showed that the people who could live on this street were all influential people in the capital. However, this grand and tall mansion seemed a little down and out. In this luxurious mansion were nobles and nobles gathered. The tall walls were in need of new paint, the tiles were old and in need of renovation. The red paint on the tall vermilion door was peeling. It looked a little shabby and bleak. Who could imagine that the owner of this mansion was the mansion of the pillar of the state general who had his own army at the western border? Similarly, because the pillar of the state general had his own army, the Shi family did not dare to be too high profile. They allowed the mansion to be worn down and did not whitewash it on the outside. He was afraid that if the color was too bright, it would agitate the emperor, who was already full of suspicions, even more. The neighbors who lived in the surrounding mansions were all officials of the court and were used to the Shi family's low profile. They would at most glance when they passed by, not daring to have any entanglements with the pillar of the state general. Once upon a time, this was a rich and powerful family that many people wanted to curry favor with, but did not have the means to do so. But now, everyone was trying to avoid them, afraid that they would be implicated if they had even the slightest connection with the pillar of the state general. This was because there were countless spies from the court watching this place. If they were not careful, they could become the accomplices of the pillar of the state general. In front of the door, the once bustling traffic had disappeared for many years. Now, all that was left was deserted. Even describing this place as deserted was a little too much. The gatekeeper behind the vermilion door was lying down in the gatehouse and dozing off. There was no need to worry about anyone disturbing him. At this moment, the sound of galloping horses could be heard from outside the door. There was also the sound of a large group of people running. Even the dozing gatekeeper could feel the ground tremble. The gatekeeper suddenly woke up. He was very familiar with this sound. It was the sound that would come from outside when the pillar of the state general or the pillar of the state general returned. Was it the pillar of the state general or the pillar of the state general? The gatekeeper's face lit up. He quickly adjusted his clothes and hat and opened the door impatiently. The first thing he saw was the gleaming swords and spears. The general on horseback had an unfamiliar face. He was neither the pillar of the state general nor the pillar of the state general. He was waving his whip viciously at the two ends of the street and shouted, "Surround this place. Everyone, keep your eyes open. Do not let a single fly out of the general's residence. Anyone who disobeys will be executed." The large group of people split into two sides and surrounded the pillar of the state general's residence like an iron bucket. The gatekeeper's expression changed greatly. He had also heard rumors that the pillar of the state general was going to rebel. Could it be that the pillar of the state general was really going to rebel? The general on the horse glared fiercely at the open door. The gatekeeper was so scared that he slammed the door shut with a bang. He didn't forget to bolt the door shut. He turned around and ran back into the courtyard. As he ran, he shouted, "Not good. Something bad is going to happen. Not good." The general's residence is surrounded by a large group of people. The shouts reverberated throughout the general's residence. The family members and servants, who had been living in fear every day, suddenly rushed out of nowhere. Their faces were pale. The courtyard suddenly seemed to be overcrowded. The mistress, Li Hongnyang, walked out from the main hall with her two wives, Bao Wanshi and Si Tuhui. Bao Wanshi was even holding the hand of a curious child. "Madam, not good. The general's residence is surrounded by soldiers." The gatekeeper shouted as he ran towards the main hall. Hearing this, the three women who were already panicking became even more at a loss. Bao Wanshi squatted down immediately. She hugged her son and cried, "I didn't expect this day to come. My poor son." So. A cold light suddenly flashed out of nowhere. The head of the gatekeeper who had been shouting loudly was directly separated from his body. Without any warning, it flew into the air and fell into the bushes at the side. Blood spurted out. The headless body fell on the road with a bang. The road was instantly stained with blood. Ah! Screams came from all around. Si Tuhui tilted her head to support the tottering Li Hongniang. Bao Wancher was so scared that she buried her head in her son's chest. The cold light that killed the person returned with a whoosh. A person walked out of the back garden and put away his flying sword. It was none other than Shi Xiaotian. He walked to the front of the main hall expressionlessly. He looked around at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Anyone who dares to disturb people's morale will be killed without mercy." A group of servants looked at the third young master in disbelief. They were so scared that they were trembling. They didn't expect that the seemingly docile third young master would actually kill someone in the blink of an eye. Looking at his expressionless face, it made people feel disgusted. Li Hongniang and the other two women also looked at Shi Xiaotian as if they didn't know him anymore. Li Hongniang said with a trembling voice, "Third brother, did you kill that person just now?" She still couldn't believe it. Shi Xiaotian clapped his hands with his back facing the three women without even turning his head. 10 masked men in black appeared out of nowhere and stood in a row in front of him. Guard every direction. Anyone who dares to enter or leave without permission, kill without mercy. Shi Xiaotian ordered expressionlessly. The 10 men bowed and said, "Yes." Then they disappeared in front of everyone like ghosts. "Housekeeper." Shi Xiaotian called. Shi Shunqing quickly ran over and bowed, "Third young master." He didn't panic at the scene just now because he had followed the great general to the battlefield. This kind of scene was really nothing to him. Shi Xiaotian pointed at the decapitated corpse on the road and said, "Clean it up. Also, pass down the order that if anyone dares to disturb people's morale again, they will be punished by the family law until they die." "Yes." Shi Shunqing immediately retreated, but his eyes revealed a bit of admiration. He thought to himself, as expected of the great general's son, he didn't panic in the face of danger. Shi Xiaotian looked at the direction of the gate. In fact, with his current cultivation of the early stage of tribulation passing, he had already noticed a large group of people when they arrived. This was the first time he killed someone. Even now, his heart was still beating wildly. However, he had no choice. He was the only pillar of support in the family. If he lost his sense of propriety, then the whole family would be in chaos. Therefore, when it was necessary, he made a move to intimidate the family and let them see his methods. Naturally, they would feel at ease. The corpses on the road had already been carried away by 2 courageous servants. The blood stains on the road had also been washed with buckets of water. The servants obediently returned to their positions and did what they were supposed to do. Although they were afraid, no one dared to show it. In the blink of an eye, peace returned to the residence. "Third uncle." The child ran over and hugged Shi Xiaotian's leg. He raised his head and asked with sparkling eyes, "Did third uncle kill those people just now?" Shi Xiaotian patted his head. This nephew was much more courageous than his eldest brother and his wife. He turned around and bowed to the 3 people on the steps of the main hall. He said, "I'm sorry for frightening mother and sisters-in-law." The 3 women recovered from their panic and looked at the calm Shi Xiaotian. They immediately felt at ease. There was still a man in the family, so they didn't have to worry about anything. However, the scene of the heads suddenly flying just now still made the 3 women's hearts palpitate. They looked at Shi Xiaotian in disbelief. Did he really kill that person just now? The 3 women looked at each other. They more or less knew that Shi Xiaotian wasn't an ordinary person. He cultivated in the back garden for a long time, but they didn't expect him to be such a person. "Third brother, what's going on with the people surrounding the general's residence? Did something really happen to your father?" Li Hongniang asked worriedly. Shi Xiaotian smiled faintly and said, "Mother, don't worry. It should be fine. If something really happened to my father, the people outside wouldn't have surrounded him. I'm afraid they would have already rushed inside." Li Hongniang sighed and said, "Your father and brothers are not here. You are the only man in the family who can make decisions. There are some things that we women don't understand. The whole family is counting on you. Shi Xiaotian bowed slightly and said, Mother and sisters-in-law, don't worry. I'm here, and nothing will happen. He said to Situ Hui, who was supporting Li Hongniang, and said with a smile, Second sister-in-law, help mother to go inside and rest. I'm here, don't worry. Situ Hui nodded. Bao Wanshi, whose tears had not dried yet, also pulled her son. Because Shi Xiaotian's thunderous means just now, the panicked atmosphere in the family immediately calmed down. The three women were very confident in Shi Xiaotian now, so they went back with peace of mind. As for the death, it was normal for a big family to occasionally execute a disobedient servant, so it wouldn't make them feel uncomfortable. On the street outside the general's mansion, there were officials who came back from work. When they saw the general's mansion being surrounded, they all shook their heads and sneered. Shi Yutian, who also came back from work, was stopped outside the gate by the soldiers. Shi Yutian, who had a bad expression, got out of the sedan chair. When he saw the soldiers at the gate of the mansion, he immediately panicked and said, What do you mean by blocking the general's mansion? The general turned his horse around and looked at Shi Yutian condescendingly. He sneered with a trace of arrogance and said, It turns out that the young master of the general's mansion is back. Recently, there have been bandits in the capital. For the safety of the general's mansion, I was ordered to protect the general's mansion. Don't come out again after you go home. Otherwise, I won't be responsible if something happens. Then he waved his whip and said, Get out of the way, let Lord Shi in. Nonsense, how could there be bandits in the capital? Before Shi Yutian could finish his words, he heard the general shout, Sir Shi, there are some things that everyone knows. Do you really want this general to tear down all pretenses of cordiality? This general is ordered to only allow people to enter the general's mansion. No one is allowed to leave. Shi Yutian was immediately at a loss for words. He waved his hand weakly and the servants immediately went to knock on the door. The group of people entered with their tails between their legs. Behind them, the general sneered as if he was sharpening his blade. When they were about to reach the main hall, Shi Yutian suddenly noticed a few servants washing the floor. He accidentally wet his shoes and immediately flew into a rage. Where are your eyes? This scared the servants so much that they trembled in fear. Big brother. A cold, warning voice rang out. Shi Yutian was stunned when he saw Shi Xiaotian standing on the steps of the main hall and staring at him. This third brother of his rarely left the backyard. Why was he standing here today? Did he know something? In all fairness, Shi Yutian was still very afraid of Shi Xiaotian. There was no other reason than that Shi Xiaotian was an immortal-like figure in his eyes. Even though they were blood brothers, he would always show a fawning expression, hoping to get 1 or 2 spirit pills or miraculous medicines. When Shi Xiaotian was in a good mood, he would also give him 1 or 2 qi recovery pills. After eating them, Shi Yotian's spirits were lifted and he became even more fawning. Third brother, why did you come out? Shi Yutian revealed a face full of smiles and immediately forgot about his previous unhappiness. He hurried over and stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up happily. It was as if he was the little brother and Shi Xiaotian was the big brother. Shi Xiaotian frowned and raised his chin towards the outside. What's going on with the troops outside? Shi Yotian's face darkened and he said sadly, I don't know if it's true or not. I heard rumors that the imperial court received a report from the west saying that father and second brother are mobilizing troops and collecting rations from all over the place. They're plotting something. And the imperial court is already mobilizing troops in preparation. I thought it was just a rumor, but looking at the situation outside, I'm afraid it's true. Third brother, you have to think of something. The imperial court clearly wants to put us under house arrest as hostages. Once father really mobilizes his troops, our family will become ghosts under the knife. Shi Xiaotian's eyes lit up. He turned a deaf ear to the latter part of his brother's words and muttered to himself excitedly, looks like boss is ready to make his move. We can finally leave this place and explore the cultivation world. Yo! Both of you brothers are here? As expected of blood brothers, you're so close. A sinister laughter rang out. The two brothers suddenly turned around and saw a person slowly walking out from the back garden's entrance with his hands behind his back. Who else could it be but Yu Qianqiu? Shi Yutian felt his vision blur, and his third brother had already disappeared and appeared at the back garden's entrance. He was extremely envious of his brother's supernatural power. He hurriedly ran over and bowed, saying, "Shi Yutian pays his respects to Mr. Yu." Yu Qianqiu smiled and raised his hand, indicating that he didn't have to be so polite. At the side, Shi Xiaotian rubbed his hands excitedly and said, "Boss, you're finally here. Does that mean our family can leave this place?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He asked in surprise, "How did you know?" "The soldiers outside are a signal." Shi Xiaotian immediately told him what he could think of. Chapter 680. After listening to him, Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. It seemed that Shi Wenguang had made a big move, and he couldn't hide it anymore. Fortunately, he had already arranged people to protect them, and Shi Xiaotian's current cultivation was not weak. Otherwise, he might have harmed this family due to his lack of consideration. When he told Ferdinand that Shi Wenguang was going to send troops, he was afraid that the people from Fuxian Island would not be calm and would attack the Shi family. That was why he came to take a look in advance. He didn't expect the imperial court to know and make preparations in advance. It seemed that he had to send this family away before the 1-month deadline was up. With this layer of concern, Yu Qianqiu decided not to delay any longer. He immediately muttered to himself, "Little Tian, order people to send all the valuable things in your clan to the rear garden. Then gather everyone in the clan in the rear garden. I'll wait for you in the rear garden." Shi Xiaotian's eyes lit up. "Are we leaving?" Yu Qianqiu nodded. Shi Yutian asked in confusion, "Where are we going?" The excited Shi Xiaotian was afraid that he would ruin things, so he immediately catered to him. "It's not safe here anymore. We're going to the place where the deities live. Mr. Yu wants to bring our whole family along, so you mustn't leak this information." "Really?" Shi Yutian was in disbelief. "Of course. You've heard what Mr. Yu said. Go and prepare with me." Shi Xiaotian seemed a little unhappy. Shi Yutian was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He immediately promised, "Don't worry, third brother. I won't tell anyone, not even your sister-in-law. I'll give her a surprise." He ran away happily. Yu Qianqiu was speechless at the Shi family's eldest brother, who was always dreaming about deities. He shook his head and returned to the backyard. He went to the small courtyard to inform Lingfeng, Beizi, and Xian Ping to prepare to leave. The Shi family was indeed a big family with a lot of valuable things. Not to mention the big and small bags, including the boxes filled with things, it was really like a mountain. In the back garden, there were more than 100 servants of the Shi family alone. In less than half a day, they had prepared all the people and belongings. With such high efficiency, it could be seen that the two brothers had done a good job in mobilizing the people. Li Hongniang and her daughter-in-law, who were gathered together, walked to Yu Qianqiu and bowed. Li Hongniang bowed slightly and said, "Mr. is still the same. You haven't changed at all. It's really enviable." As he spoke, he pointed at the people and belongings behind him and asked worriedly, "I just don't know why Sir gave such an order." Before she could finish her words, Shi Yutian ran over and held her back. He said anxiously, "Mother, Sir has his reasons for doing this. When the time comes, you will naturally know what is going on." He was afraid that his mother would make Yu Qianqiu unhappy and take him to the place where the immortals lived. To him, high positions, generous salaries, and descendants of rich and powerful families were all illusory. Only immortals were extraordinary and worth pursuing. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Don't worry, madam. Shi Yutian is right. He. When we arrive at the place, I'm afraid madam won't want to come back. You will have to thank me." Shi Yutian's eyes lit up when he heard this. Li Hongniang was still a little worried about her unreliable eldest son. She looked at Shi Xiaotian and saw him smiling and nodding his head. Only then did she feel relieved. She smiled awkwardly at Yu Qianzhou and said, "I was reckless. Please don't take it to heart, sir." Yu Qianzhou wasn't going to argue with her. With his hands clasped behind his back, he signaled the 10 black-clothed masked men with his eyes. The 10 men quickly spread out and searched the entire general's residence. After making sure that no one had missed anything, they quickly returned and signaled to Yu Qianzhou that there was no problem. The 10 men then spread out and surrounded the people and belongings in the backyard. Yu Qianzhou put down his hands behind his back and slowly opened his arms. A large amount of majestic mist gushed out from his body and slowly covered the entire backyard. This magical scene stunned everyone, especially Shi Yutian. He looked excited and thought to himself, "This is indeed the legendary deity who can breathe clouds and spit out mist." The mist that shrouded the backyard became thicker and thicker. In the end, it reached the point where they could not see the person in front of them clearly. Everyone felt that it was both magical and mysterious. However, they did not know that the backyard of the general's residence had been emptied out in an instant. In the military camp at the western border, a large piece of empty space had been surrounded by cloth. This was done within an hour after Shi Wenguang received the order from Yu Qianzhou. No one was allowed to come within 100 meters of the outside of the cloth wall. Only Shi Wenguang and his son were pacing back and forth anxiously. At this moment, the entrance of the cloth wall was lifted and Yu Qianzhou walked out with a smile. The father and son strode over and bowed. Shi Wenguang could not help but ask, "Sir, inside?" Yu Qianzhou pulled up the curtain and saw a thick fog inside. He could not see anything clearly. As the father and son looked at each other, they saw Yu Qianzhou extend his hand inside. His sleeves sucked in the thick fog like a whale drawing water. The crowd and the mountainous pile of things gradually appeared behind the cloth wall, leaving the father and son dumbfounded. Holy sh*t. They almost moved the entire general's residence over. When the people inside saw their surroundings, they could not figure out what was going on. When they saw Shi Wenguang and his son, they immediately burst into an uproar. Yu Qianzhou walked away with a smile, not disturbing the family reunion. The reason why he had released the thick fog to cover it up was because he had to pass by Utopia as a transit point. He did not want unrelated people to know the secret of Utopia, so he used the thick fog to deliberately mystify them. As for the 10 Special Forces members who were protecting the Shi residence, they had already returned when they passed by Utopia. "Boss." A call came from behind. Yu Qianzhou turned around and saw that it was Ling Feng and the other two. It seemed like they did not want to disturb Shi Wenguang's family reunion. The three of them sized up the scenery around them. When they looked at Yu Qianzhou again, they were filled with deep respect. They couldn't help but admire him. In the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, he had come to Shi Wenguang's western military camp from the distant capital. Furthermore, he had brought so many people and things at once. This divine ability was unheard of. The three of them followed him to Shi Wenguang's tent. As they walked, Ling Feng asked respectfully, "Boss, what should the three of us do in the future?" When the soldiers guarding the tent saw that it was Yu Qianzhou, they did not stop him and let him in. After entering the tent, Yu Qianzhou said with a smile, "General Shi is about to mobilize his troops. I'm afraid that someone will harm them. The three of you will continue to follow Shi Xiaotian and be in charge of protecting his family. Go." The three of them were somewhat reluctant. How could it be better to follow someone as powerful as Yu Qianzhou? However, they did not dare to disobey. They acknowledged and left. The tent was empty. Yu Qianzhou walked to the commander's seat in the center and sat down to take a nap. In his mind, he was thinking about how to deal with the Daluo sect. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly heard footsteps outside. His eyes slowly opened. Shi Wenguang happily walked in with his grandson in his arms and the rest of the family. The family looked very happy. They looked at Yu Qianzhou with respectful expressions. This was the first time they had experienced such a magical scene. They had been in the capital before, but they had arrived here in the blink of an eye. It was simply too magical. In their eyes, Yu Qianqiu had become a living god. However, there seemed to be someone who was not very happy, and that person was Shi Yutian. His expression was somewhat stiff. He had naively believed that he would be able to go to the place where the gods lived. He had been full of excitement when he was in the clouds, but who knew that he would end up here? He was dumbfounded. He was happy that his family was reunited, but he was even more disappointed. Shi Wenguang put down his grandson and flung off his cloak. He knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. Shi Wenguang, thanks sir for your help. There is nothing I can do to repay you. Please accept this general's bow. As he knelt, the entire family followed suit. There's no need to be so polite, General. Rise. Yu Qianqiu rose from his seat and walked around the table to face Shi Wenguang. He smiled faintly. Does General still remember the poem I read to you? I dare not forget, Shi Wenguang recited heroically. The mountains are high, the roads are long, and the pits are deep. The army gallops unhindered. Who dares to fight on horseback? Only I, General Shi. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile and said, I have cleared all of your worries for you, General. I hope that you will fulfill your promise to me. Let the people of the world live a peaceful life as soon as possible so that my efforts will not be in vain. Shi Wenguang said sincerely, Don't worry, sir. Everything is being prepared in an orderly manner. The army will attack as soon as possible. As an outsider, I will not interfere with the matters of war. I believe in your abilities, General. You just need to follow our previous agreement and do as you wish. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists at everyone. I shall not disturb your family reunion. I shall take my leave first. Boss. Shi Xiaotian shouted anxiously. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. What else do you want? Shi Xiaotian begged with a bitter expression. Don't leave me behind. Bring me to the cultivation world. At this moment, Shi Yutian also jumped out. He nodded and bowed, Sir, please take me with you. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He ignored Shi Yutian and stared at Shi Xiaotian. What are you going to do? You are not weak now. Protecting your family is the right thing to do. Ling Feng and the others will help you. But remember, as a cultivator, you should not interfere with the matters of war. Otherwise, I will not forgive you. With that said, he disappeared from the tent without giving Shi Xiaotian a chance to speak. Everyone in the tent searched everywhere, but they couldn't find any trace of Yu Qianqiu. Shi Xiaotian glared at his big brother. He might be the one who ruined everything. Shi Yutian walked to the side with a guilty conscience. Shi Wenguang looked around and sighed. What a godly man. Li Hongniang came over and said, It's all thanks to you, sir. Otherwise, I don't know when our family will be reunited. Chapter 681. There were few people in the vast mountain range. In the deep belly of the mountain, there were 3 towering peaks connected to each other. The mountains were so steep that they pierced through the clouds. Waterfalls splashed on the mountainside, and streams gurgled at the foot of the mountain. Sometimes, beasts would drink by the stream, and birds would fly over the forest. It was a peaceful and beautiful scene. Looking up the mountain, one could faintly see the buildings on the 3 peaks. There was no path leading to the summit at the foot of the mountain. If mortals saw this, they would definitely think that the mountain was the residence of immortals. In fact, the people who lived on the summit were no longer mortals. This was the Daluo sect, the second largest righteous sect in Huaxia's cultivation world. Under the bright sun, the glazed roof and eaves reflected brilliant colors under the wind and clouds on the mountaintop. From afar, the 3 peaks shone with colorful lights, like 3 pearls worshipped between heaven and earth. It was not a blessed land of immortals, but it was better than one. The majestic hall in the middle of the 3 peaks was called Lingshao Hall. It was the central decision-making area of the Daluo sect. At this time, dozens of people sat on the ground in the hall, facing the one-armed sect master, Luo Qingtian, who was sitting in the center. The people in the hall didn't look good. There was no other reason than the soul formation masters from the various countries were like sharp blades on their necks, able to take their lives at any time. The disaster of annihilation could happen in an instant. No one could imagine how terrifying the legendary soul formation masters were. When such a person descended, the scene would make people shudder. In fact, this fear wasn't only shrouded in the Daluo sect. All the major sects were looking for a solution. No one would sit still and wait for death. However, Yu Qianqiu, who caused a stir in the various countries, suddenly made everyone's eyes light up. All the major sects had their eyes on Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was known as the #1 master below the soul formation stage and had a good relationship with several other soul formation masters, had undoubtedly become the savior in everyone's eyes. However, what made the Daluo sect depressed was that the person who could help them out of this crisis was not someone else, but Yu Qianqiu. The Daluo sect and Yu Qianqiu didn't just have a small misunderstanding, but several feuds. You want your enemy to help you solve the crisis? It would be best if they didn't hit him when he was down. Despite their worries, the upper echelons of the Daluo sect firmly believed that profit was the eternal pursuit of the cultivation world. Hatred was nothing in the face of profit. Many examples throughout the ages had proven this point. The upper echelons of the Daluo sect had decided to part with a large portion of the wealth that the sect had accumulated over the past 1,000 years, a total of 3 billion high-grade spirit stones. They believed that no one in the world could refuse such a large sum of wealth. As far as the exalted sect was concerned, the sect's accumulated wealth was meant to be used in times of crisis. As long as the sect could survive this crisis, there would always be a chance to earn back the money. However, what made the upper echelons of the Daluo sect disappointed was that the people they sent to the Wu clan to look for Yu Qianqiu didn't even have a chance to speak to Yu Qianqiu before they were chased out. The upper echelons of the Daluo sect believed that it was because Yu Qianqiu didn't know how large the wealth was. Therefore, Luo Qingtian personally contacted the Wu clan's patriarch, Wu Sihai, and secretly revealed the number of spirit stones, hoping that Wu Sihai could help pass the message to Yu Qianqiu. Soon, Luo Qingtian waited for Wu Sihai to pass the message to Yu Qianqiu, and it was a simple sentence. Some things can't be changed no matter how much money you have. It seems that we can't count on Yu Qianqiu. Luo Qingtian sighed and looked at the elders in the Lingshao hall. Elders, do you have any other ideas? The hall fell into silence again. Zhu Xianxian, who was in the crowd, suddenly asked, "Sect Master, I wonder what the consecrators mean." Many people looked at him with some resentment in their eyes. They all felt that if he hadn't become enemies with Yu Qianqiu several times, they wouldn't have fallen into such a difficult situation today. Luo Qingtian shook his head slightly. The consecrators don't have any better ideas. Show that you will obey any decision of the sect. If that's the case. Zhu Xianxian muttered, "I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it." Everyone looked surprised. An elder beside him frowned and said, "Elder Zhu, what time is it now? If you have any ideas, just say it and let everyone discuss it. Why are you hesitating?" Luo Qingtian also nodded and signaled him to say it quickly. Zhu Xianxian's eyes flickered. Our Chinese cultivation world has fallen into such a precarious situation because we have been complacent. Maybe we can look further. Since we know that we are not the opponents of the various countries, why do we have to be opponents? Maybe it's a good choice to be friends. For example, we can try to send people to contact other countries. Since we are willing to take out 3 billion high-grade spirit stones, I believe we can make friends with them. As soon as he said that, everyone was shocked. The hall was so quiet that the sound of ants crawling could be heard. Everyone looked at each other. Suddenly, someone stood up and pointed his finger at Zhu Xianxian. He shouted angrily, "Zhu Xianxian, how can you say such words that forget your ancestors? What's the difference between this and being a traitor of the Chinese cultivation world, Elder Hong?" Zhu Xianxian shouted and stood up abruptly. He said, "Tit for tat, this is just a method that I have no other choice. Besides, everyone asked me to say it. How can you say that I forget my ancestors? Besides, Who said that being friends with various countries is forgetting my ancestors? Yu Qianqiu is a good example. Didn't he also make friends with the soul formation stage masters of various countries? Why didn't anyone say that he forgot his ancestors and betrayed the Chinese cultivation world? Instead, everyone begged him. No matter what, I am also thinking about the eternal foundation of the Daluo sect. If everyone thinks that this method is inappropriate, you don't have to use it. Is there a need to put such a big hat on me? You're twisting words and forcing logic. Elder Hong was almost speechless. Compared to Zhu Xianxian, who had been practicing outside for a long time, his eloquence was worse. All right, stop arguing. Luo Qingtian shouted and stood up. He looked at the two people who were arguing and said, to put it bluntly, Yu Qianqiu's reputation was built in various countries. If we, the dignified Daluo sect, take out a large amount of spirit stones to go to other countries to make friends, we are completely different from Yu Qianqiu. Don't say such words in the future. As long as I, Luo Qingtian, am still the leader of the Daluo sect, I will not agree to such things. Besides, things haven't developed to the end yet. Who can be sure that there won't be a turn for the better? At the same time, there was a sudden dang 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 sound of alarm coming from outside the hall. It echoed in the sky above the entire Daluo sect. Everyone in the hall sprung up at the same time and looked out of the hall, only to hear several disciples shouting anxiously, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" With the cultivation of everyone in the hall, they immediately heard the dense sound of flying coming from all directions. Some of the faster ones had already reached the top of the hall in an instant. Everyone's expression changed. A cold light flashed from their storage bags and rushed into the sky without hesitation. With a bang, it directly blasted the roof of the Lingxiao Hall. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.